Jerry Holeman, having been duly sworn to tell the truth, the whole truth and nothing but the truth relating to said matter, was examined and testified as follows. Direct examination. Questions by Mr. Name, Jerry Holeman, Holeman. And Trooper Holeman, I know you've taken depositions before. I got to assume you have. Yep, just a couple of things. Make sure you speak out loud and audibly, and try to avoid all the ahas and ahs so we can get a clean recording. And if I have to remind you of that, don't take it personally, okay? We're just trying to make sure we get a clean audio, all right? Absolutely, okay? You work for the Indiana State Police. Yes, sir. And how long have you worked with the state police? 22 years. I came on in January of 2001. And what capacity are you currently employed with the state police? Currently, I am the District Investigative Commander at the Lafayette District. That's my title. My rank is First Sergeant. Does that mean that you basically are kind of a supervisor over all investigations, both road and administrative? Yes, sir. Detective type work? Yes, sir. Okay. And in what capacity were you employed with the state police in February of 2017? The same. I was the District Investigative Commander. I was promoted probably, I believe it was in 2016, July 2016, to the District Investigative Commander position. And in the course of your duties as a law enforcement officer, just entirely, have you ever been disciplined for any kind of misconduct? No, I have not. And in terms of the deposition today, what did you do in preparation for the deposition? Well, the first one I was prepared, but it got canceled, obviously. I spent a lot of time reviewing notes. However, this week's been very hectic for me and very busy, so I haven't had a whole lot of time to prepare those notes. But I did meet with Nick last Friday, the prosecutor, and we discussed the email that you sent, the topics, and we kind of discussed some of those so I could prepare for those. Okay. So basically, you did some prep before this got continued, right? And you didn't necessarily sit down and go back through all that stuff? I didn't have time, no. Okay. Did you speak with anybody other than Nick in preparation? I spoke with Tony Liggett, Dave Vito a little bit. What did you talk to Sheriff Liggett about? I'm going to object at this point. I think that's part of work product, and I advise him not to answer because I think they probably talked about what we talked about. But you don't know? You're right, but I think it's going to elicit work product. Okay, certify the question. Let me ask you this. When did you talk to Sheriff Liggett? It would have been, I talked to him several times. So last week, probably Friday, earlier this week. It would have been before and after his deposition. And then I talked to Dave Vito last night a little bit. And basically it was about your email and the topics that you were going to discuss. Okay, did you talk to Sheriff Liggett about anything that you didn't talk to Mr. McClelland about? No, you haven't talked to Mr. McClelland since Sheriff Liggett took his deposition, right? I talked to Nick last night on the phone. Okay. Anyone else? I guess I'll just kind of ask the cleanup question. I don't think so. That you spoke with in preparation for the deposition today? No. Sheriff Leesenby. Former Sheriff Leesenby? I haven't talked to Toby in months, okay? All right, so I'm going to kind of try to work through this as efficiently as I can. It may be similar to what we've already done, but that's the way it's got to be. So let's talk about just generally February 13th of 2017, okay? We all know that we're talking about the circumstance at the trail here in Carroll County? Yes. All right. Tell me, this is kind of a simple opening question, but do you believe that there are any eyewitnesses to the actual event that took those girls' lives? Not the actual event, no. Okay, and do you believe that the perpetrator or perpetrators that were responsible for that act were seen by any individuals on that day? Yes, tell me which individuals you think saw the perpetrator or perpetrators. So there's several witnesses at different times, and I'm terrible with times and dates, so I'm just asking for names, okay? If you want exact... So there was a group of girls out there, high school or middle school girls. I believe it was Anna Spath, Riley Voorhees, and then a younger girl that we didn't release her name or interview her. She's like 6 or 7. Anna Spath, Riley Voorhees. There was one more, I can't think of it right off the top of my head, but there was a group of girls that were together that saw Mr. Allen. You believe the person they saw was Mr. Allen? Yes, I do. Let's cut to the chase. Yes. Okay, all right. So that's one group. And then Betsy Blair, who was walking on the trail that day, saw who I believe is Richard Allen on the bridge. And then after, on I believe it was County Road 300 North, Sarah Carbaugh saw a person that she believes, and I also believe, was Richard Allen. Okay? And I think that's all that I can remember at this time without reviewing reports. Did any of those witnesses ever specifically identify Richard Allen as the person that they saw? No. I don't believe any of them knew Richard Allen. Were any of those witnesses offered up any kind of a lineup photo, shown any type of images, and asked to identify Richard Allen? No. we discussed the lineups. But because of the time period when we discovered Richard Allen was the guy on the bridge, we didn't feel like that would be appropriate to do a lineup 6 years later. Why not? Just a lot changes. Again, we, as Unified Command and Prosecutor McClellan, discussed lineups, and we just didn't feel like that a lineup would be appropriate. Were you concerned that one of them might not identify him? I mean, obviously that's a concern, but I think it's more trying to have them recall those events 6 years later. You had spoke with these people on a number of occasions during the course of the investigation, right? I have not spoken to. Well, I mean, your investigative team. Yes. I mean, these are people you almost maintained constant contact with as you were working through this investigation. I would say that, yes, there was not constant, but frequent. I would use frequent contact with the eyewitnesses. So there were opportunities to kind of refresh their recollection about what was going on, just because you were talking about the case. Oh yes, but you were concerned that they may not be able to make an accurate identification if you were to offer that up to them. I think that's an appropriate statement. Yes, we were afraid that because of the time frame they wouldn't be able to give an accurate depiction of the person that they saw 6 years ago. If that would have happened, hypothetically, that would have made your investigation more difficult. If they were able to? Yeah. If they couldn't? They couldn't? Absolutely. I mean, it's a pretty memorable event, you would think, correct? Yes, okay. Let's talk about the timeline in this case, okay? Are you generally familiar with what I'm talking about when I say timeline? I'm talking about basically February 13th. From, let's just say, I'm picking broader ends, maybe 10 a.m. to 5 p.m. Is that? Yes. You generally know what I'm talking about when I'm talking about the timeline? I do. Okay. Do you believe that your timeline that has been kind of created, I'll say, is an accurate one? Yes. Okay. Did you specifically play any role in creating that timeline? Collecting data and briefs with some of the other people that collected that data? Yes. But as far as putting the timeline together, that was done by our intel analysts. Okay, can you tell me what that means? Because that's the first time I've heard that phrase. Intel analyst? Yeah, it's an analyst that we have that helps with our intelligence gathering. Who is that? Her name is Stacy Gosnell Day. And who does? There's another one. His name is Jazz Munn. Not Jasmine, but Jazz, J-A-Z-Z, and M-U-N-N. Are these law enforcement officers? They're employed by the Indiana State Police, but they're civilians. Okay, so where does Miss Day work? Indianapolis. All right, and Mr. Munn? Indianapolis. I guess just tell me generally, I've not ever heard of these people. Oh, okay. Either individually or this particular, I know intel analysts, what do? Their names are not going to be in our reports, but any work product they do like the timeline, they'll be responsible for that. So tell me what they were tasked with. If we got a tip on somebody, they would give us information. Address, phone numbers, work history, criminal history, anything that we needed to help us investigate that tip. And then also at some point they helped us with timeline. Okay? I don't want to beat this with a dead horse, but this is all totally new to me, and maybe I just have not observed it in Discovery, actually. But, so you're saying there's not really any reports with these people's, we're not allowed signatures on them? Yeah, we're not allowed to put their names because of their intelligence. We're not allowed to. Now, you put that with Kelsey's statements, other people's statements and all that, that gives us an accurate timeline. So we gather all that information, we allow our intelligence analysts to put together a timeline for us. So it sounds like they're dealing with a lot of what I would call more technical forensic. Absolutely. Electronic data and things of that nature. Yes, they're not investigators. They don't investigate, okay? They don't go out. They don't interview. They use the information that we collect to establish a nice timeline for us so we know exactly what happened when. And you can ask me times and dates and all that, and I'll have to refer to those reports. But that's okay, what we have. And it's pretty accurate, like I said, when we talk about, okay, phone data and all that, we'll get to that. Okay, it's not out of the realm of possibility. No, it's not. Yes. In this case, that never happened? No. Was there ever any discussion about why that wasn't attempted amongst there was? Yeah, there was. The rank and file, so to speak, or the brass, I should say. There was a discussion. I can't recall the reason why, but I was told there was never a time of death given. So did anyone ever suggest that, hey, we should have done this at the crime scene or with the bodies, or we should have done that at the crime scene with the bodies in order to help us create a time of death? No. I think our crime scene investigators would have been able to determine that. I mean, that's something beyond what an investigator would at that time think. So I think we would rely on our crime scene investigators. There were multiple crime scene investigators out there. Somebody, I think yesterday it might have been Andy here sitting next to me, Might have asked the question about taking temperatures or something of the bodies when they were discovered. Are you familiar with that technique? I have never seen it done, but I'm familiar with that being a technique. Yes. Was that done in this case, if you know? I do not know, but you'd have to check with the crime scene investigators' reports and ask them. You're kind of loosely referring to CSI investigators in a plural sense. Just tell me the names of the two. I think I know, but actually there's more than two. Okay, who were the primary officers that processed that scene? Brian Olehi, who has since retired from our department. Jason Page was there, and Dwayne Datzman. Dwayne Datzman and Brian Olehi are from the Lafayette Post. Who's the last guy? Dwayne Datzman. Datzman, D-A-T-Z, I believe, M-A-N. He's also retired. For the court reporter here, how do you spell Olehi's last name? O-L-E-H-Y, I believe. Okay? And then Scott Gilbert, he is the supervisor, and he's from the Lowell Post, but he was there. And then Jim Cody. Jim Cody is from down south somewhere, but he was there at the scene on the 14th. And then there were multiple others involved later on where they came back, but I would have to refer to reports on those to help with searches and things like that. All right, moving on here. How many individuals do you think were involved in this crime? I believe one. One individual, which is Richard Allen, is involved in this crime. You don't think there's anybody else that had any knowledge of this beforehand or any involvement in the actual act? I don't believe there's anyone that had involvement in the actual act, but I do believe there possibly could be somebody that was communicating with the girls and was setting the meeting up. So are you suggesting that somebody else may have been, I don't want to use the word baiting them, but involved in the preparation of this particular act? Catfishing? Yeah. Yes. With the knowledge that there was going to be an end result that involved Rick Allen? I don't know about the knowledge of the end result, but I do believe that somebody was communicating with the girls to have them meet with somebody, okay? Out there. Let me ask maybe a better question. Do you think that there was a coordinated effort to get these girls to that location by more than one person? Yes. Who is the other person? Kegan Kline. And what is your belief based on just in general? I'm not trying to get into, 5 years of investigation, but just tell me why you believe that. Why do I believe what? Let me ask a better question. Withdraw that question. Have you unearthed any evidence that connects Kegan Kline with Richard Allen? Not at this point, no. Have you attempted to unearth evidence that connects those two? Yes. We know they were living in the same Kagan's father was close in age and lived in the same area, but nothing at this point. Is there an active investigation focused on anyone other than Richard Allen? No. Not even Kegan Kline? I don't think it's active anymore, due to lack of cooperation on his part. Is your investigation still ongoing despite the fact that Richard Allen is in custody? Yes. Tell me what's still ongoing. We're still following up with information on Richard Allen that we get, for example, his confessions that he made at the dock. We're interviewing multiple officers that logged in notes, and also looking at his phone conversations that he made, Richard Allen. And we're also still trying to see if he was in contact with anyone other than Kegan Kline. Anyone at all? Yes. Okay, we're going to get to that maybe a little later. I do want to ask you one question I don't want to forget, sure. Do you have a list of all of these, I'll call them officers, that he communicated with, I guess, at Westville? Corrections officers? Yeah, these people that you're talking to. Yeah, is there a comprehensive list of those people? Yes, you should have it in Discovery. The information was gathered by a subpoena, should be in Discovery. Okay, we have obviously, forgive me, we have a lot of stuff, and sometimes you can forget to look through things, or you looked at it, but you've kind of forgotten. But there is a list that exists that was created rather recently, I assume? It would have to have been, yes. Okay, let's talk about the search that occurred out at the scene on the 13th and 14th, okay? Okay. You tell me in your own words, how did that search kind of begin? How did that come to be? Sure. Well, I'll start out by saying that I was not involved in the search. I actually heard that there were 2 missing girls on the radio on my drive into the post. I immediately called the sheriff and asked the former sheriff if they needed any assistance with the search, and he said no, they had plenty of people. And I said, if you need anything, call me. And then that would have been 8 in the morning or so. On the 14th, I did not know about it on the 13th, okay? I had no involvement on the 13th whatsoever. So on the morning of the 14th, I heard about it, reached out to the sheriff, and then later that morning, probably, I know it was close to lunch, I received a phone call from my captain. He's retired now. I'll think of his name in a minute. Sorry, I won't tell him when I talk to him. Do you know who it is? No. I just won't tell him you forgot. Okay. Anyway, I got a call. He was downtown. At some point, the sheriff's department requested a helicopter from the state police, and I received that phone call and was asked if I knew about it. I said, yes, I did. And then they said, hey, if our helicopter's going over there, you need to get boots on the ground. So I got there probably, I'm guessing, 11:30. And then shortly after that, the girls were found. So I have no involvement in either search. So in terms of state police deployment, basically there was a helicopter used. Were there any other tools, vehicles, equipment that was used that was state police property? I believe there were troopers that were assisting that morning. What tools they used, I don't know. You're talking about drones and stuff, but you weren't involved in any of that? I don't think the state police had drones at that point. We do now, but I don't think we had drones, so we would not have deployed one. Any kind of ATVs or anything of that nature? Not to my knowledge. I don't think we have. Well, we probably do, but I'd have to. Okay, watercraft, there was some talk about that. Anything from the state police? Not originally. I think Tippecanoe County had their water rescue team there, but I don't believe ours was involved in that. And when you got to the scene, I think you said about 11:30, is that right? I got to, not the scene, the area? Yes, the old fire station was where they were having all the search parties sign in and things like that. Were you actually out around the trail at any point while the search was ongoing? No. I never left the fire station until the girls were located, and then I went to the scene. So when you got there, the search, I'm going to say the search team in a general sense, was not active at that point. It was just law enforcement. There weren't still people walking around out there in the woods at that point looking for the girls. Letty in the morning? Yes. Well, when you got there, when you got to the scene, there were still people looking? They were coming up the hill. Okay, so when you actually physically went out, yes. You went out there because they found the girls? Yes. All right, there were still some people out there that were part of the search team. The search party that located the girls were still in the area, okay? They weren't necessarily down where the girls were located, but they were before I got there. I got there pretty quickly. I don't know exactly what time it was, but there were only a few officers that were there. And at that time, they were trying to secure the scene, put crime scene tape up, things like that. How big was this search team that found the girls you just referenced? If I remember correctly, without reviewing my report, there were technically 2 teams. So if you're familiar with Deer Creek, on the other side there's a driveway going up to the Weber residence, and there was a search party over there. I don't know how many, I can't remember. But they had noticed some articles of clothing they thought were in the creek on the other side of the ditch bank. So they somehow, I don't know how, communicated with the team that was on the other side of the creek, and that team was the team that located them. So were there law enforcement officials as part of those teams? No. You think they were all civilians? I believe so, yes. Did you at any point in time yourself ever sit down and speak with each of those individuals? No, I did not. But you think each of them had been consulted by law enforcement at some point after this? Yes, I do. Every one of those people in each of those teams? I can tell you the main search party members. I think off the top of my head I could tell you their names. And I know for a fact they were interviewed. And I'm pretty sure they were interviewed multiple times. Do you want their names? No. Okay, do you have a list of them? I mean, I know that it's part of the discovery, but do you have a comprehensive list of those too? Oh yeah, you're talking about how many people in total between 2 search teams? I don't know about the one on the other side, but I think there were 4 or 5 in the team that actually located the girls. So you're talking about the north side? I think what we've been referring to as the north side, but the trail side of the creek, I guess? Yes, the Mears side of the creek would be one good way. Yes, sir? And the other side would be the Weber side, basically? That would be a great way to describe it. Yes, I'll try to remember that. Okay, let's move on. Let's talk about voice dat. So we're all familiar that there is this particular recording of this phrase, down the hill. You know what we're talking about, right? Yes. Was there ever any attempt to analyze the actual audio associated with that recording? Yes, there was. Tell me what that attempt was and what the results were. Well, we tried to contact anybody that would be able to analyze that voice, and I don't remember, there were several different agencies that did that, but they all said there wasn't enough to analyze. So the length of the audio recording was just not enough. There wasn't enough content? Correct. Is that the same response you got from pretty much everybody you talked to? Yes. Actually, I don't remember the company's name that actually tried. The rest of them did not. I'd have to look at a report to tell you exactly that company that attempted, but they said the same thing that the other companies told us. There's just not enough, because we told them how long it was, and they said there's just not enough. Where was the company that tried? Michigan. You don't remember the name? I do not. Off the top of my head, I'm sorry. You never worked with them before? No. Have you ever, in any investigation you've ever been involved in, taken an audio recording and had a voice analysis done? I'm going to use that phrase loosely. No, I have not personally ever done that, no. So there was an attempt. It really wasn't fruitful? Correct. Is that kind of a way of looking at it? Yes. Let's talk about the photo of I'll call it the famous photo of the bridge guy. We all know who we're talking about, right? Yes. Was there ever any attempt to take that photograph and essentially analyze the photo to determine the dimensions of the bridge guy? Yes. Tell me what you did and what conclusions were drawn. We again contacted several companies and engineers at Purdue. I remember was one of them, and they all said that they would not be able to get a height and weight from that picture because there were too many unknowns. There wasn't a known object to be able to measure and compare to. And we had one company, the same company I'm forgetting the name of from Michigan, saying that they could. They had a new tool that they were using, but the success rate was like plus or minus 2 inches, and it was going to cost quite a bit of money. And Unified Command, along with Prosecutor Macleod, decided that plus or minus 2 inches isn't going to help. So we did not have them do that. How much money did they say that would cost? Tens of thousands of dollars. I don't remember. Forgive me for being a lawyer, but that is what I do. Did they send you like a quote or something if it was a private company? Did they send you like an email with a fee quote? I don't think I have a quote. I mean, we actually did business with them on the other stuff, obviously. They attempted to do the voice analysis. Oh, same company? Same company. So I'm sure there's an invoice of what we paid for that. But then when they came back with this new tool that they thought might work with the plus or minus 2 inches, at that time, we decided not to do it. Do you remember how much you paid for the other? I don't. 0 to 5, 5 to 10, 10 to 20, 0 to 5, 0 to 5. In the thousands? 1,000, yes. We may get into this in more detail later. I'm going to not spend a ton of time on this. But when you say there were no known objects, they talk about maybe like the railroad ties or things. We did. All of them did. But they said they needed something vertical and not horizontal. Okay? Is what I was told. So you weren't able to draw any conclusions regarding this particular type of analysis, is what you're telling me? That same company gave us their estimated height, and I don't recall it. I would have to find the report. There were multiple people that gave us estimated heights, but again, it's basically what we put out with the photo. I forget what the exact, but it's a very broad, okay, it was a very broad range. So what you're saying is, they didn't employ whatever technology they had in doing that because you didn't pay them for it, right? Correct. They just kind of gave you a layman's, I'll say a layman's. They just looked at it and told you what they thought? Yes. Okay. I'm sure they used some sort of technology, but he said that was their estimate without using this new tool. Okay. So money basically kind of got in the way? I think not necessarily money. We'd pay the $10,000. I would say more the inaccuracy. I mean, plus or minus 2 inches. You know, I don't think that's going to help you or us. That's just too broad. All right, let's talk about DNA. Hopefully this will be quick. Are there any DNA findings or conclusions that connect Richard Allen to these two girls? Possibly. Tell me about that. So there is DNA, right? This is confusing. Tell me, let me back you up a minute. Were there any DNA profiles extracted from the crime scene? Let me start there at the most basic level. Yes, tell me where that was. Again, I'd have to refer to the reports, but there was an insufficient amount of DNA. Male DNA mixed with the girls' DNA, their blood, and our forensic scientists say that they tried to amplify that as best they could. And without consuming the samples, they stopped. And we've reached out to many independent companies, and there's no independent company right now that can amplify that mixed DNA. But we know it's male DNA mixed with the girl's DNA. Okay. So the profile is not large enough. That's probably not the right technical word. But there's not enough of a profile to test it without destroying it. Sure. Consuming it? Yes. Okay. Even through the mitochondrial process? Yes. And I think I'm stepping over my knowledge of DNA. Me too. But that's what I've been told by our forensic DNA analysis, is that there's nowhere right now. Now they're saying, 5 years. That's what they told us 6 years ago. In 5 years, there might be new technology coming, and there is some, but it's not where it needs to be yet. And they're monitoring that for us to see if technology catches up with science, and they'll be able to maybe determine whose DNA that is. I'm not sure exactly what you said, but it was part of the blood from the girls? Yes, I'm not sure I understand. Explain that to me. Excluded from public access to court records. At the present time, but that's always the case, right? Right, sure. So the answer's no? Potentially yes, but right now no. It could be your DNA on that bullet. It could be mine, right? No, I don't think so. Realistically, no. But yes, it could be. I don't want to get into this today. Were you on the trail? No, I mean, realistically, I don't know where that bullet came from, but here's what I do know. Your thought that there is DNA that might connect Richard Allen to this is not supported by any scientific or forensic evidence at this time, is there? At this time, no. You've explained to me very kindly that there are samples, or partial profiles is probably the right phrase, that are lying and kind of waiting maybe to be tested later. But is there anything active going on in terms of DNA testing? Not to my knowledge. Were there items that were taken from Richard Allen's home from which profiles were extracted? There were multiple items taken from his home. To my knowledge, there was nothing indicating any of the girls' DNA or anything like that. Okay, so just to get right to the point, you didn't find any of the girls' DNA on any of his property, correct? Okay, let's talk about tool mark evidence. You mentioned that a minute ago. So you're aware that this unspent cartridge was recovered from the scene, right? Yes. In your opinion, what is the significance of that cartridge to this crime? Well, it had 3 extraction marks on it. And I don't recall the first time we met with the lab, but it was early on. I'm going to say within the first 6 months, and they talked about all the DNA that you and I just talked about and other things. But one of the things that stands out in my mind was the firearms tool mark extraction expert. I don't know what her exact title is, but she was at the meeting and she said that those marks were made by more than likely a Sig Sauer or possibly a Smith & Wesson, but she was leaning towards Sig. And she said that if we find the weapon, the gun that extracted that round, she would be able to, without a doubt, match that up. Without a doubt? That's what she said. Those were her words? Well, those are my words, but that's what well, they're pretty strong words. Yeah, you can see me taking notes right now. Yeah. She said that she would be able to match that up, unequivocally, whatever word you want to use, 100%. She said that the marks were so good that she would be able to, and there were multiple that she would be able to. And that was early on. So anytime that we got a tip on somebody or anything like that, we asked them if they had a weapon and what kind of weapon, and if anybody had a .40 caliber, we sent it down for testing. I don't know how many, but I know there were multiple before Richard Allen's. Was this person Melissa Oberg? Yes. Okay, I didn't know if there was somebody else involved other than her. No, there was. Her supervisor was there too, and I know. And then through her training us on tool mark evidence, another thing that stands out in my mind is that she compared it to a paternity test. She said there's more error in a paternity test than there is in the test that she does to compare extraction marks. And that was pretty powerful to me. You have a lot of working knowledge of paternity tests? I do know, I just know, okay, that a lot of times people that I deal with, have to have those paternity tests, and they say they're like 99.9% the father. That's pretty accurate. So in my mind, paternity tests are pretty accurate. So what I'm saying is, if she's comparing her test, then I think so she was comparing it to a different type of test that you don't have any knowledge of. You just heard that they're accurate? She compared it to others too. But yeah, okay. After you received these laboratory results from Miss Oberg, what if any concerns were raised amongst law enforcement about the reliability of them? We had unified command, we had meetings, we spoke with her, we scheduled a meeting with her, and I don't think there were any concerns. Nobody was concerned about the accuracy, not to my knowledge, or the value of those findings. If there were any concerns after she met with us and explained everything, there were no concerns about the accuracy of her testing. Was there ever any discussion about seeking out the opinion of an independent analyst? Not to my knowledge. You're working with somebody who works for you, right? Absolutely. But there was never any discussion about, hey, let's go get somebody and just get a second opinion before we jump on this? No. Was there anyone amongst Unified Command, which sounds like it was kind of morphed a little bit? There were some changes in the officers from what I understand over time, but were any of those people that were involved in this circumstance concerned about the reliability of those results? Not to my knowledge, no. Who was all there when this meeting occurred? When you met with Miss Oberg, if you recall. Prosecutor McClelland, myself, Tony Liggett, Brian Harshman, State Trooper. I believe there was. We had U.S. Marshals helping at that time, 1 or 2 of those. And actually Dave Vito was on. He wasn't there, but he was on a conference call so he could hear, couldn't see, but he could hear. And I feel like there was more than that. But I'm pretty sure Steve Mullen. So this was Unified Command? Maybe even plus a few extras? Plus a few that were helping with the investigation. Was there any discussion with Miss Oberg about the divide that exists in the, I'll call it the scientific community, about these tool mark analyses and results? I believe she talked about, obviously there are people that don't agree with certain scientific testing, she touched on it, but I don't recall what the group is or this or that. Do you remember what she told you? The only thing I can remember, honestly, is that there was a group, And obviously defense attorneys believe that group, that it's not accurate, but she used information and experience and training that she has to make me believe that it is accurate. So there was some discussion amongst you about the theory behind this discipline? Sure, above and beyond just the results that were found. Yes, hey, this is what we're going to be dealing with from the other side? Well, yeah. Any investigation, we know you're going to try to suppress evidence and challenge our findings. Yes, we knew that. Do you remember her saying anything to you about judges that have found that this stuff is not reliable? No, I do not. You don't remember discussion about any of that? If there was, I don't remember. Is there any ongoing tool mark, I'll say tool mark testing, or analysis in this case? Not to my knowledge. Other than your opinion regarding this cartridge and this gun, is there any other forensic tool mark evidence that connects Richard Allen with that crime scene or this crime? I should be asking more broadly, any forensic technology? No. Let's talk about cell phones. I'm assuming you did recover some cell phones from Richard Allen's home? Yes. And those were all pursuant to the search warrant? Yes. Were data dumps conducted with those? Yes. Was there data generated from those data dumps? Yes. Yes. How many phones do you remember, if you do, that there were actual dumps from? The only thing I remember about the phones is he had a lot of phones, but he admitted that the phone he had, back on the February 13th, 14th timeframe that we're talking about, he did not have that phone anymore. But I do know that we collected computers and cell phones. I'd have to refer to the reports on how many. I didn't review the reports that came back, someone else did, but I know we sent them to our DMRS or our forensic analysis for cell phones, and I know that they conducted and analyzed the phones. Sorry, data dumps and then analyzed the results? Yes, sir. Were there any results that connected Richard Allen with the crime scene? Not to my knowledge. Were there any results that connected Richard Allen with either one of those girls? No. Who is your DMRS? I think you said? Who are we talking about? Who is that person? I think they took them up north, so it would have been Scott Kruger. Lowell? He is out of Lowell, but he works for GRIT, which is in Crown Point, which is a task force. That's where their office is, and that's where all their tools and computers and everything are. The gentleman that's over in Lafayette, that's part of the high-tech crime unit that they have. Did they do anything in this case? Not to my knowledge. I can't remember his name. Sean Leshney? Exactly. Is that who you're talking about? Yeah. No. So I'm assuming you also were able to dump some excluded from public access per rules on access to court records. I'm not sure that that's been conducted as far as, you call them persons of interest or suspects. But anybody that we receive a tip on doesn't necessarily mean they're a suspect or person of interest. Somebody you thought might have been involved in this crime? Not to my knowledge, no. Let's talk about geoforensics, okay? Now we're getting outside of my realm of expertise, me too. Do you know what that means generally? I know you're talking about putting up geofences, yeah. Generally, yes. Okay. Was gathering that information in this case helpful to your investigation? Yes. Okay, did any of the information that you gathered from this geofencing, from these efforts, connect Richard Allen with these crimes? He was in the geofence, but more than likely his phone was at his residence, it appears. He said he was using his phone, but we have no evidence that that occurred. You also don't have the phone that he was using, right? Correct. What you're saying is that with the geofence itself, you were able to detect the existence of his phone. It was later on in the evening. I don't know the time, I don't want to give you inaccurate information, but not necessarily the exact location of it, correct? You just know it was within a certain range, right? And within that range was, I assume, most of the city of Delphi and his home? Yeah, the crime scene, his home? Yeah, pretty close. Wasn't overly helpful, basically? No, it was not. Okay, let's talk about social media activity, okay? Do you believe that your law enforcement team conducted, and I'll call it an exhaustive search regarding the social media activities regarding the girls at or near the time this crime was committed? Yes. And have you found any information in the course of that part of the investigation that connects Richard Allen to the girls? No. What about any information that would connect Richard Allen to the crime scene? Social media only? No. Any social media activity that connects Richard Allen to any suspect in this case? Not to my knowledge, no. Just with respect to, let's talk about Richard Allen's social media activity specifically, okay? Did you have a chance to conduct an investigation into that activity? Me personally, no, but it has been done, yes. And from what you know, or from your knowledge, was there any information that was discovered in the course of that investigation that was of interest to your team? Through social media? Yeah, no. Have you discovered, when I say you, I mean has your team discovered any social media activity in this case that you believe is connected in any way to this crime? Yes. I think I already know what you're going to say, but just tell me to make sure. What is it? Are you talking about social media? Anybody? Any social activity you think was connected with this crime? So Anthony Schatz is a fictitious profile used by Kegan Kline, and somebody using Anthony Schatz was communicating with the girls. Okay, that day. That morning. It's your opinion that those communications were connected with the act that occurred, the criminal act? I believe that those communications were why the girls went to the bridge, okay? Which led to the homicide. Yes. Okay, but do you think that the homicide was just coincidental? I mean, it could be. I mean, obviously, you don't know. Stranger things have happened. I do not know. If that's your answer, that's your answer. You don't know? Correct? Are you still investigating that actively? I think you told me earlier you were, as far as, well, just the nature and the connection between those social media communications and Rick Allen. Yes. Is that basically encompassed by what you mentioned to me earlier? Interviewing people? Can you? Yeah. Let me withdraw that question. Yes. Tell me what you're doing actively to try and connect the dots between those social media communications and Richard Allen. Okay, yeah. What I said earlier. As far as still searching phone data, still interviewing people to see if there was any connection with Kegan Kline. And it should be noted too, I forgot earlier when you asked a question about if we thought Kegan could be possibly associated with Richard Allen. One of his first statements when he was with his other attorney, he said that, he accused his dad of doing it. But he, in his first statement, said, it was my dad and a friend of his in Delphi. And that's as close as we've gotten so far to any type of connection with Kegan Kline or his father, Jerry Anthony Kline. Tony Kline didn't acknowledge any connection with Richard Allen? He has not. He's denied that connection? I believe he has denied it, yes. Let's talk about computers. You rounded up some computers from Mr. Allen's residence, or at least some hard drives. Are you aware of that? Mr. McClelland, is this a good place to take a break? Or are you going to? What? Is this a good place to take a break? That's fine. I realize I overlooked a couple of questions about social media before we get on to computers here. Have you discovered any social media-related evidence that connects anyone else to the scene of the crime? No. Have you discovered any social media activity or evidence that connects anyone else to either of the girls? Not to my knowledge, no. All right. I asked you about computers, so there were computers or hard drives that were taken from Richard Allen's residence. Are you generally familiar with that? I am. Was there any information extracted from those devices that in any way connected him with these crimes? No. Let's talk about some other types of forensic evidence. We'll start with fingerprints. Any fingerprints extracted from the scene? No. Was there any discussion amongst the Unified Command about how there was a lack of that evidence? I'm sure there was, yes. Not one profile was extracted from anywhere around that scene. Right? Usable profiles? No. Okay. Were there any partials? Partial profiles, yes. We talked about earlier, yes. I'm talking about fingerprints. No fingerprints, no. What about shoe prints? Any profiles of shoe prints? Understanding that's a little different than fingerprints. Right, that were extracted from the scene? They were photographed, but not extracted. Or were photographed? Yeah. Were those analyzed? No. Not to my knowledge. We looked at them, but I don't think they've been analyzed, per se. Was there ever any attempt to take those photographs and offer them up to some kind of an analyst? No. Have you ever done that before? I have not. No. Is there a process for taking shoe prints and having them analyzed, if you will? There is, and that would be the crime scene investigators. They would do that. So they would have more knowledge than I would of it. Of the process? Yes. Whatever it wasn't done in this case? No. Why? I was told that where they found the footprints was where the search party on the other side was. And there were so many they just photographed them and weren't able to determine if it was actually involved in the crime. So some of it had to do with just the raw volume of prints that were in the area? Yes. Were there any that you were aware of that were photographed or discovered on the Mears side of the creek? Not to my knowledge. No, let's talk about the surveillance video, okay? I commented on this yesterday. There's a lot of surveillance video in this case, right? I mean, thousands of hours of video? Yes. And you're generally familiar with the locations where a lot of that video came from? Circumstances? Somewhat familiar, yes. Was there any surveillance video that was collected in this case that connected Richard Allen to that particular crime scene? Yes. Tell me what it was. Who's your harvestor? There's a video of a vehicle matching the vehicle that he owned, matching the description of a vehicle that he owned. And then through his interviews, he stated that he traveled that way in a vehicle, and we have that vehicle on the video. What's the matching description? I believe it was a black car. He said he was driving at the time. He parked over at the old CPS building. He referred to it as something else. He being Richard Allen? Yeah, Richard Allen referred to the site that he parked at as something else. He didn't refer to it as the old CPS building. That's what it was. So what do you recall about the description from the video? Was it just a black car? It was a vehicle that he owned at the time. Did you watch that video yourself? I did not watch the whole video. I believe I was shown a still shot of the vehicle compared to his vehicle. How would you describe the vehicle? I would describe it as being matching the description of the vehicle that he was driving at that time. What was that? I can't remember exactly the type of vehicle. Subaru, I believe. You said, I'm sorry, I believe it was a Subaru. I'd have to refer to the report to give you the most accurate answer. Was there any other surveillance video that was recovered that connected Richard Allen to the crimes in this case? No. Was there any surveillance video that you recovered that contained any information about Richard Allen's whereabouts on February 13, 2017, other than what we talked about? No. Something from here in town or his employer or anything like that? No. Is there any surveillance video that contains images of Richard Allen at the trail on February 13th of 2017? No. Let's talk about what I've titled here as hate crimes. Okay, that's kind of my general description. Did any part of your investigation focus on the possibility that these deaths could have resulted from a hate crime? Yes. Of some sort? Yes. Tell me what the focus was. The focus was how the bodies were found, and that they had sticks laid on top of them. And I forget the exact investigator that brought up a term called Odinism. So we, Sergeant Steve Buckley, reached out to a professor at Purdue that actually was out of the country at the time, and we did not release the photos, but we released a sketch of the sticks, how they were laid, and some other information. That Purdue professor, I can't remember his name, said that it was not Odinism or any type of cult worshipping or any type of group that would have conducted the crime. And then also we reached out to a private company that sent two people, a retired Pennsylvania state trooper and a retired psychologist or psychiatrist. I can't remember which. It might be both. I don't know. I can't remember their names. I know the retired trooper was Pazzapoli, and they teach classes for a group on crime scene analysis and hate crimes. They were up here for a week, and they reviewed the data as well and said it was not a hate crime. The FBI's U looked at it. I don't remember if they determined one way or the other. We also had the U.S. Marshals Behavioral Analysis Unit look at it, and she said it was not anything related to a hate crime, and her term was it was an undoing. Laid the sticks, not to touch the body, put another stick over to block the wounds that Richard Allen created on the girls. It was called an undoing. There were no signs of any type of hate crime. Those are the experts who told us it was not. So let's talk about the Purdue professor. What's his or her name? We'd have to refer to the reports. I didn't get a chance to look at that. Okay, can you tell me the timing of when that occurred? That was early on in the investigation. Yeah. Did you ever talk to the professor? I did not. I talked to Sergeant Steve Buckley, who was in communication with them. Did you ever take a look on your own to see what this professor's qualifications were? No, but I know Steve did. And I don't know what his background was, but he studies that Norwegian Nordic culture that Odinism is. So you've never spoken with that person directly? I have not, no. Let's talk about this Pennsylvania connection that you mentioned. I think you said Zappoli, yes. Did you communicate with any of those people directly? I did. When did that, I'll call it that analysis, take place? Probably, I don't recall. It was later on, years after. We had multiple people review the case, but he was referred to us by, I forget who. I don't remember the year. Do you think it was this year? No. Do you think it was last year? No. Do you think it was possibly 2018 or 2019? 2018 or 2019, I'm guessing. I'm going to use this before COVID. Before COVID, yes. That seems to be a threshold these days that people remember. All right, and then with regard to the FBI, you said they took a look at it too in the same context. Can you tell me the timing of that? That would have been early on as well, within months. 2017. Did you communicate with any of those people with regard to that inquiry? In a group. They presented their findings verbally to Unified Command via a phone call. What do you recall about those findings? Just what I said earlier. Basically, they said it's not connected. There's not enough information to prove that it was a hate crime or an organized group that committed it. Okay, that might be a little different to me if I interpret that. So they were saying that they couldn't make a definitive conclusion because there just wasn't enough information. No, they were saying that if it was a hate crime, there would be no doubt, there would be so much there that you would know. In your opinion, they were saying it's not a hate crime? That's my yes. Is there any recording, audio, video of this particular conversation that occurred, this meeting with the FBI? No. Why was none of that memorialized? We asked for a report, and they didn't give us a report. They said they wanted to have a phone conversation with us, so we agreed to have a phone conversation with the FBI, that analyst. My experience, Forgive me? But cops document about every step they take these days. Why would the FBI not want to put that in a report? You'd have to ask the FBI. Did you ask the FBI? No, I did not. Why not? They said they wanted to relay the information to us via phone, and we agreed to have them do that. But you didn't record it or anything? No. What about the U.S. Marshals? When did that occur? If you could estimate. That occurred just more recently, 21, 22. Why was it that that inquiry was made with the U.S. Marshals in 21 or 22? Just getting more opinions. The U.S. Marshals came into the investigation later, so they said, hey, we have this, we want to try to use this resource, and we agreed to use the resource. Okay, so you had been through 3, I'll say, inquiries about this, and then you chose to do this with the Marshals? Yes, and was that memorialized in a document? I believe there is a report, yes. What was their conclusion that was drawn? Same as I told you earlier, that she, I know it was a she, I can't remember her name either, stated that it was an undoing. That's where the undoing reference came from. Was the Marshals? Yes. And that's the term you recall them using, or her using? Yes. Were any of these particular inquiries driven by anything above and beyond what you saw at the crime scene, like the sticks and all that? No. Were there any tips or anyone assisting with this investigation that suggested there might be some kind of hate crime or extremist group involved? So that's kind of a two-part question. You want me to answer it? Let me break it down for you and make it a better question. Did you receive any tips during the investigation that suggested that this crime was carried out by a hate group? I'm using that phrase really broadly, right? I understand your question. No, I don't believe there were tips initially until maybe some later on, but there's no tips received. I'm talking about during the whole investigation. Specifically being a hate crime? I don't recall. What about a crime motivated by some extremist group rather than some random act, right? Like a cult? Yeah. No, I don't recall any tips. Was there any other information generated maybe by the officers in the investigation that suggested that this was carried out by some extremist group, aside from the things we talked about at the crime scene? No. The sticks, that's the only reason why anybody would have followed up on that, because of how the crime scene was, yes. So any kind of inquiry that you made to Purdue, to the FBI, to the Marshals, to the Pennsylvania law enforcement authorities, was all generated by law enforcement means? Yes. And that basically was driven by the sticks that you talked about earlier? Yes. Any other circumstances at the crime scene that drove law enforcement to inquire about any of that? Not to my knowledge. Be more specific? I might be able to answer that question you're asking. Well, the wounds on the girls, the location of the bodies, anything at all that was part of the material part of the crime scene? No. That drove those suspicions? No. We're on crime scene. Let's talk about that. In this case, was there a concerted effort by the law enforcement community to maintain some confidentiality with regard to that crime scene? I don't think there was any, whatever words you used. I mean, there's just an understanding as a state police investigator. You don't talk about your investigations with the public or anything like that. There was no, for lack of a better term, gag order put on them at all until later. You're talking about just the crime scene? Yeah, people that were at the crime scene? No, not to my knowledge. In my experience, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, in dealing with crime scenes, it's pretty important to try to maintain some privacy with what happened at a particular scene, at least for a period of time early in the investigations, right? Yes. The way I understand it, one of the ways to test the veracity of evidence, and people may be making confessions and things, is to determine whether or not they had intimate details about crime scenes. Absolutely. And I get the impression in this case that that was pretty important, not to just go out among the townfolk and start telling everybody what happened. That is correct, yes, because you were wanting to make sure that if there was evidence that came later, or individuals that maybe acknowledged some participation in this crime, what they were telling you was authentic and accurate, right? We call it protecting the integrity of the case. Okay, there was an effort, that's a leading question, but there was an effort to protect the integrity of this particular case. Not specifically. It's just that as a detective, CSIs, we know how important that is. Did you share? It's just knowledge. I should let you finish. Go ahead. It's just knowledge that we don't share intimate details of a crime scene with anybody. What about the family? No. Has that ever been done? Not to my knowledge. I've never shared any intimate knowledge of the crime scene, how it was located. I know that some of that information was leaked out by, I believe, search member parties. Was that also part of your investigation? What? Leaked information, in other words, kind of an investigation within your investigation to figure out who was leaking information. Yeah, we had detectives looking to see who was leaking information. Yes. What prompted you to look into that? Probably social media. and things that were getting released on social media and podcasts. We were trying to figure out who was giving that information. Can you give me an example of that? I'm trying to kind of follow along with you here. I'm thinking more Billy Smith down at the bar talking about things. You're like, wait a minute, he shouldn't know that. Right? Talk to me about social media. What kind of things? Social media, and we call them web sleuths. People on the internet saying this, putting out false information. So at some point, I know our public information officers would reach out through the media saying, please don't release false information, because a lot of the information that was being leaked was false or exaggerated. Some of it was accurate. I don't recall specific details of what was released to them, but that was later on in the investigation where we were battling with the podcasters, social media, and also just general, like you said, Billy Smith down at the bar. But it's intensified now with social media because they can put anything on the internet. As you sit here today, can you recall anything specific, any specific information from the crime scene that you were involved with that you followed up with? No. Is there anything that you have knowledge of in terms of this type of information that made you say, hey, we need to look into this? If you were kind of prioritizing, I get the impression there were a lot of podcasters talking about a lot of things, right? I can't think of any specific details, just general information being released. Like you said, it's frustrating to investigators because we want to be able to protect the integrity of the investigation. When we do hear something, either a confession or somebody heard someone say something incriminating, then we want to be able to know that they didn't get it off the internet. Did you do a good job as a unit in maintaining the integrity of the scene in this case? I believe so, yes. Do you believe that there were any material breaches of that integrity, scene integrity? Once we secured the scene, no. Did you ever talk to anyone that was on either one of these search committees about this problem? That, hey, there's material floating around out here that is of concern to us. Were you responsible for? No, I was not. Did any of your team ever do that? Yes. I don't know who has contacted them, but yes, they have been contacted about releasing information. Yes. Basically told not to do it? Yes. So I guess to make sure you understand what I'm asking, did you receive some information from any of these internet sleuths or podcasters that made you say somebody needs to go talk to this person on the search team about that information? Yes, we did. Okay, can you tell me what you recall about that? I believe one of the search members had released some information about the crime scene, how the girls were found. I don't know the details, and someone from the team went and talked to them. I don't know who it was. Do you know who the search member was? I believe it was DJ Erskines. DJ Erskines. Erskes. Tell me everything you remember about that circumstance. Basically what I just told you. I don't know the circumstances. I just know that he had released some information and it got out to web sleuths and podcasters. And then we talked to him. Somebody on our team talked to him and said, shut your mouth. Please withhold that information to help us investigate it. Do you know if this information was in some type of tangible form or if he was just telling people stuff? I don't recall. But there is a law enforcement official, a police officer, presumably somewhere, that dealt with this. Yes, you just don't know who it is? That is correct. Do you believe sex played a role in this particular crime? I believe it was, potentially sexually motivated. I don't believe there's any, or the evidence leads me to believe there was not any sexual misconduct with the girls. Okay, that there was no touching, so to speak, or anything like that? Could have been touching. There's no signs of sexual activity with the girls. When did you first become aware of Richard Allen being connected with information? I don't recall the exact date, but it would have been in end of 2022. And how did you come across that information? Tony Liggett called me and said that I knew that we were going back and looking at certain documentation to make sure we've done it multiple times. And he had called me one evening saying, hey, we found some information. Does the name Richard Allen ring a bell? And I said, no, not off the top of my head. And then he told me about the information that they found. Okay. When he told you that, was it your impression that there had been some work already done, kind of from a law enforcement standpoint, to connect? Yes. Richard Allen with the scene? Yes. More than just saying, hey, we've got a report that there was a guy that talked to one of our officers. Not much more, yeah. Okay, so what is your understanding about what contact occurred between Richard Allen and, let's just get to it, Lieutenant Doolin, I think is what somebody told me. Captain, I'm sorry. You're right. I did hear that too. He may have been a lieutenant then, at the time when he reached out to them. So what I recall is that there were numerous law enforcement agencies involved. I do recall that the Department of Natural Resources was involved. I don't remember specifically who, but obviously Dan Doolin had received a tip to contact Richard Allen, that he, I don't know how, contacted somebody that said he was out there. and Dan Doolin met him and did a handwritten report. And that's pretty much all I know. Do you know anything more about that meeting, other than what's referenced in the report? No. I mean, maybe a better question is, have you sat down with Officer Doolin and just had a discussion about this? I have not. Why was it that it took, 5 years for this information to be communicated amongst your group of investigators? That's a great question. I wish I could explain it. So you don't know why? Is that the answer? I don't know why, no. Do you think there was some error in processing the information? There was an error. I don't know if it was processing or whatever you want to call it. But at some point it got lost in the shuffle and entered incorrectly. So, when you say entered incorrectly, you're talking about some kind of a data entry that was made. Yes, that may have been partially the cause of this. Yes. Was there any point in time when Richard Allen refused to cooperate with law enforcement in this case? Yes. Tell me when that point in time occurred. I don't know the exact date and time, but we met with Richard Allen at the command center. Steve Mullen and Tony Liggett brought him in, went and picked him up at his house, brought him over, and conducted an interview. At some point, he got frustrated with the investigators and stopped cooperating, basically. We asked him for consent to search, consent to give DNA, and he did not cooperate in that consent or that capacity. This was shortly before his arrest? Yes, probably a couple of weeks before. Were there times when you asked Richard Allen to assist you in this investigation, and he did cooperate? I would say that's a fair statement. Tell me when those times occurred and what happened. I mean, he came in and talked to us the initial time, and then he came to the state police post, where I had contact with him, so he cooperated in that sense. So on 2 different occasions, you asked him to meet with you, to talk about this case, right? Second one. The first one, they went to his house, yeah, and asked him to come in, and he did, yes. Did he know? Well, is it your opinion that he knew that you were wanting to talk to him about this case on both of those occasions? I think that's a fair statement, yes. In other words, there wasn't any kind of ambush or surprise attack, hey, come and talk to us about your grandmother or something like that, and then no, absolutely not. Okay. And on both of those occasions, he came in and sat down and talked to you? Yes. He didn't lawyer up or anything like that? He never asked for legal representation? No, other than those 2 occasions. And I want to make sure I'm familiar with the facts here. Was there a third occasion when you asked him to come and talk to you? No. Well, not come and ask. I didn't ask him. Clarify for me. I went and attempted to talk to him a 3rd time. Yes. And where was that? It was at Westville Correctional Facility. Oh, okay. So we're already on to Westville. So basically there were 2, I'll call them interviews with Mr. Allen that he cooperated with. And then the 3rd one was when you're saying he wasn't cooperative, when he stopped answering questions. Well, he didn't answer any questions the 3rd time. Okay? I'm saying the first 2 times he was uncooperative because he stopped answering. And we asked him to do some things to help us in the investigation, and he refused to do them, such as consent to give us his DNA, okay? And consent to search, take a polygraph. He denied all that. He wouldn't cooperate with us on that aspect. Were all of those contacts with Rick Allen either audio or video recorded? Yes. So you never had contact with him while he was in this community without audio or video? No. Even when I transported him, I had audio. Did you also at some point request some assistance from his wife? Yes. Was she cooperative with you? She did come in and interview multiple times. I'm not sure how many. Was there ever any time when she wasn't cooperating? No. So then you mentioned that there was a 3rd visit at Westville with Richard Allen, right? Yes. When did that occur? I don't expect you to give me the exact date. Again, I don't know the dates, but it was shortly after he was transported up there. I would say maybe within a couple of days after, within a week. Who made that visit? It was Steve Mullen, Tony Liggett, and I. What was the purpose of that visit? Unified Command, Prosecutor McClelland, and the rest of us discussed. He's had some time now. He knows that we weren't, pulling any punches, so to speak, and he's had some time to think about what occurred. He had not, at any point to our knowledge, requested legal representation. And so we thought maybe we could go up and clarify some things and get another statement from him. That was the gist of it. Basically, you were wanting to go up there and get a confession? Absolutely. I mean, that's what you do, right? Yeah, it's what we try to do. Cut to the chase here. And was there a bona fide, I hate the word plan, but an approach that was agreed upon in terms of how you were going to approach him at the prison? Yeah. Were you going to use a read interrogation or some other technique? I don't know if any of that was discussed. The strategy was that Unified Command felt like I had a better rapport with him, and I was going to go up there and attempt to interview him. And tell me what came from that attempt. They brought him in. The correctional facility brought him into an administrative office. I think I said, "I'm sure you don't want to see me right now," and he shook his head like he acknowledged that he heard me. And I said, "But I'd like to sit down and talk to you." And he sat down. I read him his rights. He said, "I don't want to talk." So then the correctional facility officers took him back. Was that audio or video recorded? I believe just audio. It could have been video, because they were... Obviously, you know that any time they moved him, they had video cameras, I don't recall. All that was collected by Steve Mullen, and he should have that. Did you take a handheld with you? I did not. To record any important details. I asked and they said they had one there for us to use. They didn't want us to bring, sometimes they would let us bring a recorder in, depending on where we were going. But at that time, they said they would provide one, I believe. Kind of an extension of what we're talking about. Is there any evidence in this case to suggest that Richard Allen admitted to any responsibility for playing a role in this crime before he was imprisoned? Can you that he said, "Hey, I did this," or "I was involved in this crime," before he went to jail? Not specifically, but he made some comments that were concerning to me. Okay, tell me what those were. At the scene, he kept saying, "You've ruined my life. It's over. It doesn't matter." At the scene? At the search warrant scene. I'm sorry. So I was at the search warrant. I was securing the scene. You mean in the home? Yeah. We secured it, and at one point I had private contact with him multiple times actually, and he said, "It's over. It's over." What else did he say? You would have to refer to my report to get the exact... I did do a report. That was not audio recorded. Okay, so he didn't specifically say anything in detail about the crime scene or what had happened. No, just concerning comments that innocent people don't normally make. Okay, was he under any stress at that time? Probably a little bit of stress, yeah, I would say. Why was he under a little bit of stress? Police were searching the house, that he killed 2 girls, and probably stressing out that we're going to find evidence to prove that. Okay. Maybe more than a little bit of stress, right? He was smoking a lot of cigarettes. Is there any information or evidence to suggest that he admitted to any of these crimes while he was incarcerated here in Delphi? Not to my knowledge. Same question about White County Jail? Not to my knowledge. Then when we get to Westville, we're familiar with the phone calls. I don't want to get into the specific dates and times, but when generally do you believe it was that Richard Allen made any incriminating statements at Westville? Just give me a general time frame. Obviously, I'm going to say I'd have to look at my report, sure, to get the accurate time, but it was probably March, April, May. So how did those come to your attention? Since he was incarcerated, we were monitoring his communication, other than with his attorneys. Obviously, we can't do that. But we have access for his phone calls, and they're recorded, and they say on there that they're recorded. So from day one, we were listening to his communications with anyone, mostly just his wife, occasionally his mother and father or stepfather, actually. Are you aware that they were actually monitoring his communications with his lawyers at one time too? I was never told that, just from what you said. You learned that later? During the last hearing, that's what you said they were doing. Did you ever call and see if that was true? No. Do you have any reason to disbelieve what I said? I have no reason to disbelieve. You. No. So did you have some kind of... What was the process by which you were monitoring the phone calls? I personally was not. I have access to it, but I'm pretty busy, so we had detectives assigned to do that. It would be Dave Vito and Brian Harshman, and then they would report any significant communication, anything significant to the case. They would not listen to it every day. But, again, they're busy too, so they would listen to it very frequently. So he probably made that statement a couple of days, the initial statement, a couple of days before we were able to monitor and hear him. So, basically you had a couple of officers that were receiving these audio recordings, I assume from Westville, right? We have access to the company. Oh yeah, we have access. We just go on there and it's on the computer. We have access to, what's the name of that company? I knew you were going to ask me that. You don't know? There's different ones. Cass County uses a different one. White County uses a different one. Doxy uses a different one. I don't know what the company is called. So, basically, somebody is logging on a consistent basis, and they're listening to the phone calls and reporting what they're hearing? Yes. And were you getting routine updates about what was being heard on those phone calls? I was. And it should all be documented in the case report, which you may not have yet because it's ongoing, fairly new. Yeah. So tell me how that gets documented. In the case report. Yeah, supplemental report. Well, I mean, like every time somebody listens to a phone call, are they saying, I sat down today, I listened to a phone call on April 3rd or whatever, and this is what I heard? Probably not. Like a log, I guess, is what I'm thinking. No, they just do a case report on any significant information to the case. I doubt they're saying in the report that they listened to every single phone call. So for example, if Rick were communicating in a phone call that he hated that place and that he wasn't going to make it, or he couldn't stand to live there anymore, you might document that? That would be documented, absolutely. Oh, it would be? Yeah, okay, good. What wouldn't be documented is him talking to his wife about selling the house. Stuff like that. Tell her he loves her or whatever, right? But if he was talking about something specific about his detention situation, you would document that. More than likely it would be documented. I'd have to look. But yes, where is that case report? Is it in your computer, basically? Yes, it's called RMS, Report Management System, through the state police. So I'm assuming you've listened to some of these recordings. I believe they were from roughly early April of 2023, where he's making incriminating remarks? Yes. Okay. Have you heard any statements where Richard Allen was saying anything with any specificity regarding what happened on February 13, 2017? 1. Not heard, but was documented. Tell me what that is. I have not had an opportunity to interview that correctional officer yet, so we'll break that down. Still investigatory. Hold on a minute, let's go back. I'm talking about phone calls right now. Okay? No. So other than him saying, I did it, or I killed those girls, have you heard anything with any specificity other than that on any phone calls? No. So then the next step is that you're aware that during his incarceration, he's communicated with people at the prison, whether they be officials or inmates or whatever, right? Yes. There's times when he's spoken words up there? Yes. Do you believe that there are people that are monitoring him on a consistent basis? Yes. Why is that happening? It's my knowledge that he's placed on different levels of suicide watch. Do you believe that they are monitoring when he's not placed on suicide watch? Somewhat. I believe he's monitored all the time on video. But as far as physically with correctional officers, I believe it's just when he's on some sort of suicide watch or companion, suicide companion. Are you familiar with this? I'll call it companion program that they have employed at the prison? Very little. What do you know about it? I know that they have a program that inmates go through, and they're trained to sit with prisoners that are contemplating suicide. So they only have the companions when they're dealing with suicidal prisoners. That is my knowledge. I may be wrong, but that's what I was told. And who told you that? Correctional facility. I don't remember exactly who. So with regard to his communications with other humans, non-phone communications, are you aware of any information that suggests that Richard Allen has said anything specific about his involvement in this case? Yes. What is that information? We haven't interviewed him yet. Do you want me to answer it? Yeah, you can. It was documented that he stated he used a box knife to kill the girls and that he disposed of that box knife, box cutter, at the CVS in the dumpster. And do you know when this conversation took place? Not exact. Generally, probably the same time frame as we're talking about, March, April, May. So who is it that you believe this communication was made to? I don't know the correctional officer's name. Could have been an inmate too. It's that list that I told you about earlier, and we're in the process of, you don't know if it was a CO or an inmate? I believe it was a correctional officer, but I would have to go back and look at the notes. And you think this statement occurred sometime in April maybe? I'm going to say March, April, May, same time frame. There hasn't been any real follow-up with it yet? We're working on it. Yeah, what takes so long to go talk to a correctional? Maybe I'm misunderstanding what? I had that same question. It takes some time because there are several different shifts, so it's not lack of cooperation. It's just lack of getting our schedule to meet with their schedule. They have A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H shifts. Day shifts, 6A to 6P, 6P to 6A. So we're in the process. We have to schedule meetings. I'm struggling a little bit with this one. You might sense that. You have a gentleman that you believe committed this crime. He's incarcerated. He may have said something that implicates him to this crime scene specifically. Let me clear it up for you. Well, let me finish the question. I can clear it up for you in 2 seconds. Let me ask the question. You can clear it up, and it's taken weeks and months to actually just drive up to Westville and talk to the human that heard this? That's what I'm hearing. Is that accurate? So you're assuming that we got that information when he said it, right? No, we have not. Are you curious about that as you sit here today? Oh yeah, absolutely. Okay, anything else other than that statement that you're aware of that was spoken by Richard Allen that implicates him in these crimes? No. Was there any evidence to suggest that there was a box cutter involved in the crimes in this case? Yes. What's that? The wounds, obviously. Both girls they're incised wounds or whatever. They're what? They're incised wounds, incisions? Yes. Is there anything beyond that forensically that suggests that, hey, this was a box cutter versus some other type of sharp object or metal object? No. Just the autopsy referred to it as a sharp object. Is there any type of investigation involving that circumstance, like the way the wounds look versus that type of an object? We've looked into it, But they can't tell us. No conclusions? Just sharp object is basically all we're getting. Okay, any information from CVS or surrounding surveillance cameras to suggest there was ever a box knife disposed of there? If we had that information, we're still going through it. I don't know where we're at on that. In what form would you expect to have that? We all know people don't monitor their trash? Oh yeah, they do. Okay, they do give box cutters to their employees. We know that. We know what kind. Okay, anything else that suggests that Richard Allen ever disposed of anything? Up to this point, no. Do you have any surveillance video that you're looking at from that time frame? I'm not sure if we have the surveillance video from CVS at that time. If we do, we're looking into it, but I think we were trying to get it, and there might be some issues there if I remember correctly. So there has been some attempt to recover some video? Yes, that just happened more recently, or did that happen back in, let's say, the fall or winter of 2022 when you started questioning him? We probably more than likely, if I remember correctly, we started asking for documentation, work records, things like that back then. And if we didn't have the surveillance video, which we more than likely might have, I don't know, I'd have to look, then I'm sure we requested it. Do you know as you sit here today whether or not there's surveillance video from CVS from the time period around this crime? No. What do you know about Mr. Allen's mental health circumstances while he's been at the prison? I don't. I don't know anything official, so if you want my opinion I can give it, but I'm not a psychiatrist or a psychologist. Well again, let's talk about official information. Have you received any type of medical documentation or anything related to medical treatment of Mr. Allen while at the prison? Not to my knowledge, no. Have you talked to any medical providers that have communicated with him at the prison about their interactions with him? No, I have not. Have any of those providers reached out to you? No. Have there been any attempts to try and obtain that information by law enforcement? Yes. What are those attempts? I believe that was information that was in our subpoena that we wanted, that I think the defense said no. Basically the judge saying that she was going to protect that information? At this point, yes. And are there ongoing attempts to try and get that information? No. What about Richard Allen's employment information? Have you made an attempt to obtain any information from CVS regarding his employment with that company? Yes, we have. And have you received any information? I believe we have. We had to subpoena them as well. I know we were waiting on it. I don't know if we got it or reviewed it yet. To the extent that you tried to recover anything, is there anything that sticks out in your head today that in any way is helpful to this investigation that you've obtained from his employer? Not at this point, no. Who made the decision to arrest Richard Allen? It was a unified command decision. Was there any disagreement amongst the unified command about whether or not that was the right thing to do? No. If you would not have had those results from Miss Oberg in the lab, would you have arrested Mr. Allen? No. Were you talking about arresting him before you received those results? No. We were talking about continuing investigations, other avenues of approach that we'd concluded already and talked about already, and continuing the investigation. We met with Unified Command, the prosecutor, multiple times, and once we received that information, then it was determined that we were going to give him a chance to explain that, and he couldn't, so shortly after that interview, we detained him. Are you aware of anyone else that has confessed to these crimes? There have been a few mental patients. Jay Harper has interviewed a couple, but their confession was so outrageous, it didn't match up with what we talked about earlier. We kept enough of the details close to our vests and protected the integrity of the investigation. So what this person was telling us, it was not. You said mental patients? That's kind of a phrase of art for me a little bit, like somebody's institutionalized somewhere. Yeah. Tell me who these couple of people were. I don't know their names. We'd have to look at the reports. Okay, let's talk about either one or both of them and try to separate them. Can you give me some context here? Do they live around here? No. Where do either one of these people live? One was reported down at the VA, I believe, in Indianapolis. At the VA? Veterans Administration. Okay. The other one was in another hospital down in Indy. He's being treated for mental illness. And who would have been the point guard, law enforcement-wise? That would have dealt with these things. Jay Harper, I believe. Is he retired? Not yet. I don't have any context for any of this. No, not yet. Did you talk to either one of these people? No. So you told me about two. You were a little vague about how many. I don't know exactly how many. Are those the ones that come to mind of significance? Yeah, those are the ones I recall. Any other? Sorry, I cut you off. Those are the ones I kind of partially recall from off the top of my head. Any other confessions by anyone that you can think of outside of these VA hospitals or institutionalized people? Just what we talked about with Kegan Kline. Not confessing to killing girls, but just being in communication with them and setting up meetings. So the idea is that because he kind of implicated himself partially, that he is responsible in some respect. I would agree with that. Am I articulating what you're trying to communicate? Yes. Anyone else that comes to mind that you're aware of? No. What about any? Are you aware of any reports of anybody confessing their responsibility for these crimes to non-law enforcement people? There are probably a few, but again, the details that they would give to that person were not correct, I guess for lack of better terms. I understand the question. You're asking me if Joe Schmo said that Brad Rozzi confessed to killing girls. Is that what you're asking me? That's exactly what I'm asking. We have had some of those, but again, they've been followed up on, and I would have to look at the reports. I don't have any names off the top of my head, and I did not personally interview anybody. You did not? No, not that I can recall. Do you recall, or do you know who would have been involved in those? I would have to look. Just depended at the time, right? You didn't have somebody specifically assigned to these types of things? No, I did not. Okay, are you aware of any, I'm going to use the word loosely, confessions of this type and nature from anybody around here locally? No. Somebody that might have been like, oh, that person lives by the trail or lives down the street or knew the girls or their parents or anything like that? Oh, so you want to know if we got a tip from somebody? No. I'm just saying, generally speaking, I don't care how the information was communicated. Are you aware of any confessions that were allegedly or purportedly made by anybody from this general area? No. Not some guy at LaRue Carter down in Indy at the hospital or whatever? No. That's probably an old reference. I got it. I'm getting old. Nothing here regionally, generally speaking? Not that I can remember. Let's talk about motive real quick. Have you drawn any conclusions about the motive for this particular crime? I'm asking you about your opinion. Were there, I'll say, people that told you or your staff that they were out there yelling for them? Yes. Family members. I don't remember exactly who, but it would have been the family members when they were contacted early on. All right, let's talk about these sketches. So we've asked some of these questions. I'm going to try and short-circuit this a little bit. There were 2 sketches that were released to the public, right? Yes. The first sketch I'm going to call the Carbaugh sketch. That is correct. Are we on the same page? Yes. Is it your opinion that Sarah Carbaugh saw the individual responsible for this crime? Yes. Is it your opinion that the image that was created is an image of Richard Allen? Yes. And then the second sketch, I believe, was the, can I make a statement real quick to follow up on that? Sure. It's my opinion that that is Sarah Carbaugh's depiction of what she saw and what her description of Richard Allen was at that time and place. I get the impression that there's been some discussion about this amongst you folks before you walked in here today, right? Knowing that this was going to be part of I knew this would be part of it years ago. Betsy Blair is responsible for providing the information that generated the second sketch, right? That is correct. And do you believe that Betsy Blair saw the person that was responsible for this crime? I do. And do you believe that the image that Betsy Blair is responsible for partially creating, understanding that the artist created that too, is an image of Richard Allen? It is her depiction and her description of what she saw that day and that time? Yes. Do you agree with me that there are some fairly striking differences between those 2 images? I would agree there are striking similarities as well. Or I would disagree and say that there are some differences in the sketch, but that's to be expected. If any person looked at that, just a layperson, do you accept the fact that it would be easy to conclude that they're 2 different people? No. You think that they're very similar? I think in my training and experience, no. I'm talking about a layperson. I'm not talking about your training. I'm talking about if a layperson looks at those, do you think it would be easy to distinguish between those sketches, that they're 2 different people? I don't think it would be easy. I think it could be concluded that it's possible. Possibility. You released these sketches to the public, right? Yes, we did. And you were asking the public to participate in identifying an individual? Yes. And part of that ask, so to speak, is that you might suggest to the public that you were looking for 2 different people. We had to clarify that in one of the press conferences. That was a concern? Yeah. And that concern was driven by the differences in the 2 images. One looks a little younger, but again, if you talk about witnesses and there's 7 of us in this room, and somebody walked in right now, and we all did a sketch, they'd all be different, right? Because everybody's perceptions about the way things happen are different, right? But when asked, A, is that what you're saying, right? But then when asked later, it's fair to say, if this is the person you saw by showing the actual photo, they say, yes, that's the person with the clothing description. That's the person I saw. It's not the sketch artist's fault, or our fault, or the person's fault that they might not look exactly like the actual photo. What are the similarities between the 2 in your opinion? Both white males? Both had similar, Well, the sketches, both white males, they're both close in age, one looks a little older. One of the statements by Betsy Blair was he looked younger, but he was older. So she had him saying he could have been older but looked a little bit younger. That was her opinion. So he was skinny? Pretty much, yeah, I guess you could say that. Okay. Were there discussions amongst the law enforcement? I'll say the Unified Command or anybody that was dealing with this issue about the difference between the two sketches? Absolutely. Was that a concern that was so much so you were going to address that at the press conference? It was part of the script, so to speak, right? Obviously, you referred to a layperson. We wanted to do a little bit of education saying this is not uncommon for someone in a different position, different age, different lighting, different angle, to describe someone differently than another person. So focus on the mannerisms. I think Superintendent Carter at that time said, focus on the video, the short video. We said focus on mannerisms, focus on clothing. But these are the sketches that we had, and we wanted to give that to the public. So there was a script that was in place to address the concerns about the differences between the two photos. It was a strategy to make sure that the public understood that we believe this is the same person, even though there were some minor differences. In your opinion, they're only minor? In my opinion. Have you talked to anybody else that thinks that some of those differences are more than just minor? Other than you and I? No. Anybody in the community? No. You think everybody you've talked to agrees with you? I think if they don't, I could explain what I just explained to you, and they would understand why there are differences. Yes, were there concerns that either Miss Carbaugh or Miss Blair, that their descriptions of who they saw or what they saw were not quite accurate? No. You were confident that the way they articulated their observations, that they were accurate? Yes, their physical description. Then later, obviously, them seeing the picture that we released to the public saying, that's the person I saw. And those conversations with these two women went on over the course of several years. Frankly, yes. As you kind of refreshed all this, yes, okay. And I never personally spoke to either one of them. Let's talk about the roles of the agencies here. This is more administrative. So I think I've heard now that basically, from a material standpoint, a substantive standpoint, the state police, the county, the sheriff's department, the FBI, the U.S. Marshals have been mentioned a few times. Early on, maybe the DNA was kind of helpful. Am I leaving somebody out? Multiple agencies, city, county, even the city here? Oh yeah, we've heard this term Unified Command. Tell me what that means to you. We established Unified Command early on with the main departments that were involved, so it would have been the FBI, state police, county, and Delphi City. And the objective there was to make sure that we weren't making any decisions that the group didn't agree on. FBI, state police, county, and the city? Yes, and those are kind of the four heavy hitters, so to speak, and obviously the prosecutor's office. And how were decisions being made? We'd talk about it, discuss pros and cons, and if that person changed their mind and said, you know what, I thought about it, you're right, the pros outweigh the cons, this is for the better of the investigation, let's do it. And that's how we'd make our decisions. I'm assuming you've been involved in other investigations where there are multiple agencies? Yes. So have there been circumstances in the past where you've been involved where agencies are making decisions just based on what's in their best interest? Yes. Has that been not helpful to investigations? Because of that, very detrimental to the investigation? Yes. Did that ever happen in this case? No. Not decision-making, no. Were there any conflicts between the different agencies about how to proceed with the investigation? One cop and another cop, I'm talking about. Yeah, I understand your question. Tell me about those conflicts. At some point later in the investigation, the FBI, Rich Davies had retired, Mike Peasley had been reassigned, and we really didn't have anybody. We had a couple of people, but they were in and out, switching. And at that point, the FBI would come up and say, hey, we're going to do this. We need this information, and then in return, we'll give you this information. Or we would ask, hey, we need to see your report on this or that. And at some point, they weren't giving us the information that we were requesting. And so that caused some issues above. Nothing like you said within the investigative team, but it was brought up in briefings up the chain of command. Majors, lieutenant colonel. Superintendent found out that there was an issue, particularly trying to get a video that I forget what they're called. I want to get the acronym right. But anyway, they had a team come up early on and went around and collected all the surveillance video, documented it, gave us a copy. We were looking for one particular, the Mara Mart or Mini Mart here in Delphi, and we did not get that. And then there were some issues with that. So there was some tension because the flow of information wasn't what your team wanted it to be between the two entities. Correct? And then there was some finger-pointing issues. Okay, what was the significance of the video from the Mara Mart? Where is the Mara Mart? I'm sorry. Was it Maramart or Minimart, Prosecutor McClelland? I think it's out by Monocle's, isn't it? Yeah, I think so. Oh, I know what you're talking about. That little gas station out there on the right as you go up the hill. The significance. Yeah, what was the significance of that? I guess it's worth asking. Some phone data that someone was searching that location that day. The day of the girls, okay? So theoretically, somebody was in the parking lot or in the building or somewhere near that site? No. There was a thumbnail that someone was searching that particular location that we had tips on, and we were trying to find out if they were there utilizing the video, and that's when the finger pointing started. Did that information in any way? Was it helpful to your investigation? Could have been. Why? Because we could have been able to verify if that person was actually in Delphi. Who was that person? Kegan Kline. Okay, so I guess I am asking fair questions. So this isn't just this random circumstance that came up. So you were on Kegan Kline's trail? You were wanting to follow up with that, and the FBI couldn't, or didn't offer up the information that you were wanting, and it caused tensions between the two agencies. Is that a fair summary? We have written documentation that they went and collected the hard drive, and they said that your brother, Josh Rozzi, was supposed to collect that. I knew that was going to happen at some point. Sorry, no, it's okay. It's just the story of my life. So they said Josh Rozzi was supposed to collect that, but Josh Rozzi's role was not going out and collecting video. His role was early on, people would bring phones to him at the command center, and he's a DMRS certified. So when the superintendent found out they were trying to finger point the state police, and particularly Josh Rozzi, that struck a nerve with him. And we thought that that was very pertinent to the investigation. When they said that they weren't the ones that went and got it, that we were, that caused some issues. And Superintendent Carter stepped in and took care of those issues. To the best of your knowledge, did he basically tell them you didn't need their assistance anymore? I think you'd have to ask him, but I think his statement was, there's no federal nexus in this. Please turn over all your information to the state police and we'll take it from there. You'd have to ask him what his exact... You didn't have that conversation with these people? No. But he told you what he said? He told me. You're summarizing, and we ended up getting what we believe is all the information that the FBI had. What you wanted? Well, they didn't get that. Okay? Forgive me for being this is getting a little convoluted for me. I know. I understand. So you never did obtain the information that really started this whole conflagration? No. Okay, we attempted to go back, but obviously years later. Okay, I see. So basically he can speak for himself, but he kind of fired the FBI in a way. I mean, they're not working on your case anymore? Well, they shouldn't be. If they are, they aren't giving us information. You're not communicating with any FBI officers about this case? I communicate with them. Occasionally they'll send us tips that they receive, so I'm assuming if they're sending us those tips, that they're not involved in the case. When did this all happen? Just give me a time frame. Right around COVID, so 2021. And they haven't been part of Unified Command since then, I guess, is maybe a better way of putting it. No, and they hadn't been part of Unified Command since Rich Davies retired and Mike Peasley left? I don't know when that was. That would have been 1920, somewhere in there. Were there ever any discussions amongst the Unified Command or extension of that group about concerns about how the FBI handled the investigation when they were initially involved? We had concerns that we weren't getting information. You know, it was like pulling teeth to get a report, and they're 302s, I think they're called. But there were concerns that we weren't getting information that we needed to help, I guess. But as far as the investigation, I think they did a fine job. It's just sharing the information we were having issues with. So some of this incident or circumstance which prompted Superintendent Carter to pull the plug was also precipitated by some other smaller or less significant issues? Yes. They were kind of similar, frankly. Flow of information? Yes. Okay, were any of those problems related to the processing of the statement Richard Allen gave to Lieutenant Captain Doolin? No. Doug Carter, what role did he play in all this? What's that? What role did Doug Carter have in this investigation? Superintendent of the State Police. I mean, he was in front of every camera, and that's okay. It's a job. He's very passionate. What role did he play in the investigation itself? Kind of the nuts and bolts. Zero in the actual investigation. His role as the superintendent is to give us the manpower, resources, and funding that we need to conduct the investigation. Now, he's very passionate. It's not uncommon for him to show up at major crime scenes, officer-involved shootings, anything like that. He's shown up at ones that we've worked, just shows up. Hey, what do you need? So it's not uncommon for him. He's very passionate about it. But his role as far as the investigation is zero. He's not an investigator. His role as the superintendent, he makes sure that the state police is providing the necessary resources, manpower. For example, Dave Vito was fully assigned to this investigation because Jay Harper could retire any time. That was his decision to allow us to bring in a young detective or trooper and teach him what to do. So you use the word passionate. He strikes me he's also kind of a very involved superintendent? Yes, very. Is that a fair word? Yes. And maybe he's even a little bit controlling of a superintendent. More so than maybe what you've dealt with in the past? No, I wouldn't say he's controlling. I've told him no, and he's understood. The state police has an information officer that typically stands in front of the microphone and is trained to speak to the public, right? Yes, we do. And I noticed that he took on that role in this case, in some respects, in a more extensive fashion than the press officer. Would you generally agree with that? We had some issues with the sheriff and the superintendent, and we discussed those. And I think if you look at the case as it went on, there were fewer people talking about it. There were some concerns about how information was getting to the public, and you think he was part of cleaning that up? Yeah, we wanted one person. We wanted one voice. We didn't want multiple people talking, because obviously that's when discrepancies may occur. So because he's passionate and well-spoken, we did ask him to do a couple of the press conferences, and he agreed to do so. But the information that he released was, I don't want to say approved, but reviewed by Unified Command. Scripted? There were some things that maybe we didn't want him to say, and he didn't. Let me get back. Just one thing I kind of forgot to ask you about with the second sketch that was released, I think in 2019. Superintendent Carter mentioned in that press conference that, this person could be right in this room. We all heard that, and if we act like we didn't, then we weren't really listening. What was the intention behind that statement? I talked about Pozzopoli and the other guy come. We had them come in and had some strategy with that. Our strategy was to basically, for lack of better terms, call out the person, tell them, hey, we're on to you, we're watching you, we're coming after you, whatever comments he said. But it was strategically pointed toward that person to see if we could generate more information, or maybe get him active again and maybe make mistakes, and we would be able to flush a rabbit out of the bush? Yeah, there you go. But at no time was there any suspicion that the person who committed this was right in that room, like from a literal standpoint? Literally, no. So the information that was provided was not done because of the accuracy of it. It wasn't a genuine statement. It was meant for other purposes. It was genuine, but it was strategically planned. Yes. It wasn't accurate. We did not know that the person was in the room. Some people could have surmised that maybe it's the arsonist, right, that likes to watch the fire, but that was not the case here. No, at that time, did you have any suspicions at all as to who you were talking to? As to who he was talking to would be more. We had suspicions on it. Yeah. Was one of them Rick Allen? Not at that time, no. All right. Polygraph exams? We kind of talked about this yesterday. Can you just tell me real quick who it is that conducted polygraph exams in this case, just the ones that you're aware of? Steph Thompson, who's deceased now. I can't think of the Peru guy. Collins. Matt Collins. I believe Steve Mullen did a couple early. Is Mr. Collins out of Peru? Well, he covers Peru, but I don't think he's out of Peru. I don't think Peru has. He's one of your guys? Yeah, Steve is. Who else? Mullen, you said? I thought Steve Mullen may have done a couple early on. He is a polygrapher, but I may be wrong on that. But I know he did. I'm cutting you off because I'm a little impatient in life, not with you at this point. No, you're good. Anybody else you can think of? There were other agencies. John Eager, I believe, from West Lafayette PD. Don or John? Jon? Eager? Okay, off the top of my head, I know Steph and Matt did the majority of them. You use polygraphs in the course of your profession all the time, right? Yes, and I think now we're kind of talking about things that you and I have some common familiarity with. In my experience, and correct me if I'm wrong, one of the most common uses of them is in sex cases where you've got allegations of molest or things like that. Is that a fair assessment? Yeah, it's a fair assessment. I seem to see the trend more than residential entry cases or burglary cases. Yes. Let me put it this way. Do you agree that you use those exams in cases of significance? High crimes? Yes. On a consistent basis? Yes. And one of the reasons why you use those exams is because you're trying to determine whether or not somebody is being truthful or dishonest with you? Yes. And when you rely on those to the extent that you believe the accuracy of those, or I should say the results of those, are reliable in a courtroom. Yes. I mean, in other words, you're willing to administer a polygraph to somebody, take that result, walk into a courtroom, and have your prosecutor offer it up to a jury? If it's stipulated, yes. And your confidence in that process is so much so that you're willing to support that approach? My opinion is a polygraph is a tool that we use for, like you said, to determine if the polygrapher is going to tell us whether they detect deception. But we still use it as a tool to go back and interview and re-interview to let the person know that they're being deceptive, and the tests show that. Maybe kind of use it like the read process, right? Right, it's a tool. I haven't thought about that. It's a tool. I'm being a little bit wordy. I guess what I'm saying is that tool, you believe, in the course of your employment, that tool generates reliable enough results to walk into a courtroom and offer it up in somebody's trial? Yes. I mean, if it didn't, you wouldn't promote that kind of behavior, right? Correct. So in this case, we're not going to get into all this, every person you've polygraphed. That's not the point of today. Were you specifically involved in any polygraph examinations where you were sitting there kind of watching, observing, and sharing information in that context? One, tell me who that was. Tony Kline, where did that occur? Peru. And was this, give me some general time frame, pre-COVID, during COVID? I'd have to look at the report to tell you. A couple of years ago? Oh yeah. Okay. Was this around the same time that I believe it was Trooper Vito, and there was a female officer that were kind of working the Kegan Kline angle? Two separate investigations. The female worked it 2017, and then Vito picked it up in, 2019. So, it would have been after. Kegan Kline was polygraphed earlier in 2017. Tony wasn't polygraphed until later. The only humor I've gotten out of this case in its truest sense is Kegan's first name. Do you know how he got that first name? It's irrelevant. But do you know? Do you want me to answer it? I'm just asking. It's a waste of time and money and the taxpayers. But yeah, I know. Okay, if you'd like me to answer it, I didn't know if there's any truth to that. I didn't know either. It's kind of interesting. It's weird. It is weird. So, with the polygraph exams, that's the only one you participated in? The exam with Tony Kline? That I observed partial? Yeah. What was the result of that? He passed. Was his passing that exam enough to convince you that he was not a part of this particular act or crime? No. We'll get back to that later at some point. Are you aware of any other polygraph exams in which you, I'm going to say, were involved with, even if maybe you weren't physically there? That you participated in during the investigation? You watched them? You had meetings about them? I mean, as a supervisory capacity, I was told about a lot and updated about a lot of polygraphs, so I'm aware there were multiple. It's probably not that great of a question. Let me try and rephrase it. Did you watch any other exams? Like actually sit down with popcorn, so to speak, and watch the videos? Of the exams themselves? Yeah, I've watched some videos of exams, yes. Okay, but I wasn't there for the exams. Yeah, I understand that. Do you remember which ones that you watched in particular? Kegan Kline's first polygraph in 2017. I think that's the only one I've watched. Others were just, they would tell me about it. Just getting reports? You're shaking your head, yes? Yes. Were there any times during this investigation where you had recommended seeking an arrest warrant for someone other than Richard Allen? No, I don't think so. What about any other law enforcement officials on your unified command, or an extension of that? No, I don't think we got to that point, no. I think I covered kind of what's ongoing with you earlier. You think this may be a good time to take a break? I'm getting ready to do that. I just wanted to make sure because I have other questions I wanted to ask. I just want to make sure I've got the basics covered here. Yeah, let's take a break. A recess was taken. We're back on the record. State versus Richard Allen. We took kind of a short lunch break, and we're still in the process of conducting the deposition of Officer Holeman. Officer Holeman, I just had obviously over the break, I had a couple of thoughts come to mind that I didn't ask you about. One of them is we talked about voice analysis earlier. Do you remember talking about that? I do. Let's kind of revisit that. So with this particular video, I've forgotten now, 43 seconds, is that right? Sounds about right. We're all talking about the same video from the High Bridge? Yes. Is that the only video that you're aware exists? Yes. And is that the totality of the video? Yes. In that video, there were some words that were spoken. Down the hill were kind of the most notable ones. You're generally familiar with that? I am. Was there ever any conclusions drawn about who it was that was speaking those words? The words that you mentioned? Yes. About hey girls down the hill? Yeah. The person on the bridge that they encountered, which we believe is Richard Allen. And do you agree with me that when you watch that video, that there's really no way to tell if the person on the bridge is actually speaking words from a movement standpoint? On the video? Yeah, that's correct. I mean, just to make sure we agree generally on the facts, you can't see his mouth moving or the person's mouth moving or whatever, right? That's correct. When he talks, the video is pointing toward the ground. Was there ever any discussion about the possibility that that sound could have come from somebody else? No, nobody even thought about that possibility, at least in the context of your unified command meetings? No. So you were just making the assumption that that sound came from that particular individual? I think a realistic view would be the person that encountered them during that. Like you said, it was only 43 seconds, so there was no other person in that immediate area that we're aware of. Was Ron Logan a suspect in this case? Yes, and is it fair to say that there was a collective approach to investigating him as a suspect? In other words, all the agencies were participating in that? Yes. He was garnering that much interest, basically, that you were kind of throwing all your resources at that? Yes. Was there a point in time when Ron Logan was definitively excluded as a suspect in this case? I believe so. Yes. When did that occur? I don't know the exact time, but he obviously becomes a prime suspect when we find 2 homicide victims on your property. So therefore, we started looking into Ron Logan. A collective, and again, this is me as a supervisor. I did not interview him. I may remember some people that did. I didn't participate in the search warrant, although I went there took the guy's water, whatever. But what I remember being briefed on was, Ron Logan went that morning around 11:53-ish to drop off trash at what they call the transfer station, which is the dump. And he was there about 5-10 minutes, went back to his house around 12, we believe. Later on, I'm unclear if he actually called a cousin or the cousin actually came over, but a cousin, I don't remember his name off the top of my head, came because Ron Logan was, I believe, HTB or driving while suspended. He was on probation. He would drive anyway, and he would always have a cover story if he got caught or whatever. He ended up going to a fish store in Lafayette where they have him buying some fish. And I think the time was off. I think it was 4:44 was the time of the receipt or whatever. It might have been that they didn't change the clocks, so it might have been closer to 5:55. But then he went back home, made some comments on his phone dump. We see that he is telling people that he got new fish and put them in the aquarium and letting them acclimate. So with all that, it would have been very difficult with the time frame for him to be able to go out there and do redaction here. Did you ever discover that he had any connection with either one of these girls? No. Or my client? No. Was there any forensic evidence that in any way connected him with that scene? No. No evidence whatsoever. Whether it be like DNA evidence or fingerprints or even digital forensic evidence. No. Do you recall administering a polygraph or him participating in a polygraph? I remember he did participate. I don't remember. I think it was John Eager, and he used a different technique that wasn't approved by the FBI and state police, and they were like, let's not have him do polygraphs anymore. He did a few, but I don't know what the technique is because I'm not a polygraph examiner, but I know we stopped using Mr. Eager because of that. He was adamant that he was showing deception on some of the questions, but we'd have to get that report. I wasn't involved in that. So Mr. Eager was used? Was he only used for this purpose, this one polygraph, or did he do others? No, I believe he did some others, and he was using a different technique. And eventually after reviewing, I didn't, but after other officers reviewed it, they said, hey, this isn't right. They talked to, I think, Matt Collins and Seth Thompson and some other polygraph examiners, and they said, yeah, he's using this different technique, it's not reliable. Who did this guy work for? West Lafayette PD. How long had he worked for them? I don't know. Probably a while. So the West Lafayette Police Department was using a polygraph examiner that was employing a technique that was not acceptable to other examiners that you worked with. That's correct. Now, I don't know if he used that during their investigations. Is he still working there? Yes? Yes. You'll never use him again, right? Because of what you learned about this circumstance, right? And we try to use our own. It's just more convenient. Is it okay if we take a break for a minute? Yeah, off the record. So this gentleman conducted other exams in the case, and there became a point when you were concerned about the technique he was using. So essentially you chose not to use him anymore? Yes. I mean, some people would say he kind of got fired, but he's still working for the Lafayette Police Department? Right. So the results that you were getting from the exams were apparently raising some suspicions about the technique? I'm not sure exactly what raised the suspicion about the technique, but I think it was a new technique that he learned. I don't know the specifics. All I know is after some other officers reviewed these, they brought it to our attention, Unified Command, and said the FBI and the state police recognized wasn't a proper technique and asked us not to use him anymore. And we agreed, and Unified Command agreed that we weren't going to use him in that capacity. I don't know if he did a couple after that or before. I don't know how many he did. But we could definitely find out. I just don't know. So presumably then you would have called Ron Logan and said, hey, we need to do this again because we just went through this and our technique wasn't appropriate. I think as the investigation furthered with the information I already told you, we didn't feel it necessary to do another polygraph. We had enough information that wouldn't put him in that R. It would have been very, 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 very difficult for him to be able to be in all those places. So you didn't re-examine him? Not to my knowledge. You didn't even try, really? No, I don't think so. Did you talk to his son only one time? I never talked to his son. Jay Harper did. Your team? We talked to him multiple times. Were there any lay witnesses that communicated to you that they felt that Ron Logan was responsible for this, to the extent that it had some substance to it? I know there might be some in Georgia or Alabama or Utah or something. We had tips on him, but it was a general tip that we got on a lot of people. He looks like him, sounds like him. That was pretty much it. When you were comparing Ron Logan's movements with the circumstances at the trail, you concluded that essentially he had, I'm going to say, an alibi for your time frame? Yes. Do you agree, to the extent this could have happened later in the evening, that he actually was out at his property during that time period? I think all the evidence indicates it happened between 2:30 and 3:30. Well, I'm talking hypothetically. Hypothetically, if it happened at night, then yes, Ron Logan could have been there. Was there anybody that was able to account for his whereabouts at that time? No, other than his phone data showed him at home. He lived alone, right? He lived alone. So he didn't have a wife that said, oh, we were watching some sitcom or Netflix or anything? No, he did not. Did anyone that either knew Ron Logan or was a family member of Ron Logan tell you or your team that he was a violent man, that he had violent tendencies? I don't know a family member. I know there were some ex-girlfriends, if you call them that. That said that when he was drinking, he would become verbally abusive. I don't know if those ever got physical, I don't recall that. But we did have some information that he had a little mean streak in him. Yes. What about guns and knives? Did he own guns? He did. Actually, we did 2 search warrants. So initially when this happened, I know it was a Detective A.J. Smith from the state police who was looking into him driving, and he was on probation. So we did a probation check and we took quite a few guns. None of them matched the caliber or make that we believe expelled that round. What about knives? I don't recall him having a lot of knives, but I'd have to look. I believe there were, but I'd have to check. I know that we took some long guns, I can't remember handguns, but I do know from the briefs that nothing matched what we were looking for. Did you know Ron Logan to be associated with any extremist groups? Ritualistic type groups, anything like that? No. Whatsoever? Not to my knowledge, no. Kegan Kline, a man that's fresh, a human that's fresh on everybody's radar. Was he a suspect? Yes. And is he still a suspect? I think he's suspected of communicating with the girls, like I said, but the evidence through our investigation indicates that he was not in the area during the time of the homicides. And was he kind of like Ron Logan, another person, where there were considerable resources from all of your agencies that were directed toward him? Yes. Did Kegan Kline ever admit that he actually participated in this crime? I mean that he knowingly, willingly played some role in this crime? Yes. Tell me what that admission was. He admitted to setting up a meeting with his dad and a guy in Delphi initially. He changed his story and said that it was him and his dad, and he said that he rode over to the bridge, and his dad went to meet the girls, and he stayed in the Jeep. I believe it was a red Jeep, which we located, searched it, didn't find any evidence indicating anything that Kegan said. He also said they threw some items off the bridge. We searched the bridge, we found no items. We had used every investigative technique that we could to try to find evidence indicating that he was involved, and we could not, other than he admitted to being Anthony Oshotz and communicating with the girls and setting the meeting up. Do you have any doubt in your mind that he was Anthony Shotz? No, kind of alter ego or whatever phrase they use in pop culture these days? No, no doubts. In fact, he was basically in some ways kind of admitting indirectly to some of that recently in Miami County, right? Yes. Was there ever a time when you definitively excluded him because of an alibi? No. It's kind of an odd question because he's not giving you an alibi, he's saying he's there. But I assume you were working the reverse angle to vet his credibility? Right. That's why I asked the question, right? I understand your question. So the reason that we eliminated him from actually being at the crime scene is because we know he didn't ride with his dad on the route that he took, because the video shows. We also know that he is actively downloading child porn on his phone at a residence in Peru during the time that we believe the crimes occurred. So you have some digital forensic evidence that he was active on the computer or his phone, you said, at the time that you believe these things occurred. During the time frame that we believe these crimes occurred, yes, he was actively using his phone. Do you know the location of the phone when it was being used? Yes. Is this through the geofencing technique? Forgive me if I'm misunderstanding you. The question is, do you know the location of the phone? Yes. When he was actively using it? Yes. Where? It was at his residence in Peru. How do you know that? Through the forensic evidence. I was told that they could find out through phone records that it was being actively used in that area. With the I can't explain geofence data dump. I know. I was given a report orally, not a written report. There is one. But I was told that he was on his phone in Peru at his residence. Did you go back to Kegan Kline after you learned this information and have another communication, a meeting with him? Yes, we did. What was his explanation for your findings? He had no explanation for it. Did he continue to acknowledge his responsibility for part of this? He changed his story quite a bit, but yes, but it was consistent in that he said he was there, that his dad did it. Did he ever ask you specifically for any consideration, as we say in the business, in exchange for the information he was giving you? He wanted to be put into the witness protection program. He never asked for any consideration like you're talking about, like as far as plea bargains. I think there were some discussed, but he didn't give us any information that we could verify. But he was wanting basically to give this information to get put on a witness protection program. There was no agreement between you and he or his representative that if he sat and talked to you, he was going to get ABC in return, not me. The prosecutor might have made, you're talking about Sinkovics? No, Prosecutor McClelland. He probably communicated with Jeff Sinkovics. Do you know that? I know there were communications, but I don't know of any pleas, deals that were struck, right? So at the time that your team sat down with him and talked to him, you're not aware of any deals that were made that he would get something in return for providing information, whether accurate or not accurate? No. Why are you kind of hesitating? At one point, I know the prosecutor was going to offer him immunity, but I think that's different from what you're asking. That's why I'm kind of hesitating. As far as, hey, if you communicate, we'll give you this many years, or whatever, I don't think. I wasn't involved in any of that. Now that he's in jail, has there been any, well, now that he's convicted, has there been any attempt to reach out to his legal representatives to forward your investigation in any way? Not yet. You think that still possibly may happen? Yes. Why is it that you would want to do that at this point? I think you always want to give him a second chance, or in this case maybe a fifth, sixth chance, to be honest, and make things right if he knows anything. So the idea is he's been sitting for a while now on this other case, and he might come up with a different version, because he's seeing the world differently now? Well, I think his world has changed. He was in luxury Miami County, and now he's in a correctional facility, which is obviously different people there. I don't know what goes through their minds when they get there, but I think he knows it's for real now. Maybe if he does have any information, do you know if he's filed an appeal in his case? I do not know that, no. Do you know where he's C? Regional. Let's talk about Tony Kline. Was he a suspect in the case at any point? Yes. And all these agencies still working his angle too? Yes. Was there a point in time when he was definitively excluded? I think so. I mean, we exhausted all other efforts. Tell me how that happened. At this time, with the information we have, we can't put him in Delphi or on the bridge. Through the forensic evidence that we got through the digital phone data, he also was given a polygraph, and there's no evidence. We searched his house, we searched his phones, like I said, and there's no evidence indicating his involvement. Did he have an alibi on that particular day that you were able to confirm? I don't recall. I think he had an alibi, but I can't recall. Dave Vito would be a great person to ask about anything Kegan and Tony Kline related. Do you recall him taking a polygraph? I do. What do you recall the result to be? Like I said earlier, he passed the polygraph, or did I say that earlier? I thought I did. You referenced it, but I don't remember what you said. Yeah, was this polygraph conducted by this examiner in Lafayette? No, it was not. New technique? No. It was Matt Collins, I believe, with the state police. Was Tony Kline cooperating with you at all times during the investigation? Not all times, but I don't think any defendant cooperates all the time. Tell me what you remember about him not cooperating. I mean, he showed up and we talked to him. He lied to us quite a bit about... We had surveillance on him, and when we called him, he said he was working when he was actually out in his garage drinking a beer, because we had surveillance on him. So he lied to us. So I think that's not cooperative. If you're lying to the police, I don't think you're cooperating. He lied to you about little stuff? Little stuff. Yeah. Multiple times when we confronted him about his involvement, he would stop cooperating, or just get up and walk out. Things like that. I can't remember if we got consent to search his house, or if we had a search warrant. I believe it was a search warrant. Did you ever know, was there ever any, I'll call it forensic connection maybe between Tony Kline and these girls? Digital forensic information? No. Were you able to determine definitively that Tony Kline was not utilizing his son's digital devices? No. There's still that possibility? That is a possibility. Those two were living in the same house? A short period of time. Yeah, they were living together during that time frame. But then Kegan moved out. And when you say during that time frame in the weeks leading up to this circumstance? Yes. The February 13th incident? Yes. Do you know, or is there any information that suggests that Kegan Kline had any connection with any kind of hate groups, extremist groups, anything of that nature? Not to my knowledge, no. Again, I guess the same questions with regard to Tony Kline. Not to my knowledge, no. What about Dave Liebert? Do you know Dave Liebert? Personally, no. Was Dave Liebert ever a suspect in this case? Yes. And tell me why he was a suspect. Location where he lived. We called him the gatekeeper. There's a gate that you have to access to go back to Weber's property. And when we were out there, when we were following up the investigation, other officers were like, this guy is the gatekeeper because he would let them in out of that. He was interviewed, and I don't recall by who. His wife was interviewed. He cooperated for the most part until we asked for consent on a couple of things. I do believe we searched his residence. I'd have to refer to reports to tell you anything about that search. Offered him a polygraph, and I think he denied taking the polygraph. That's all I know about that. So when you say he wasn't cooperative, one of the things was the polygraph? Yes. Help me out here a little bit. Maybe you can answer this. So that road, you said he was the gatekeeper, right? That road that goes back, I guess kind of to the north-northeast, I think, towards the river, and then goes more towards the east. I think it kind of winds around the bank. It's platted as a county road. Is it your opinion that that's a private drive? That's what I believe. I know there's a sign there, but I've seen people put signs up in their yard when they didn't have the right to do that. Let me ask you this question. Have you dealt with access to that roadway? I've had access to it. I've been there, but I always thought it was a private drive to Mr. Weber's house. Were you getting permission to go on there when you were? Yes. Or were you just going on because I'm a police officer? No. We would contact the Webers. I believe the mom has a different name, so Brad Weber and his mom is remarried, but I can't remember her name. But we would always call them and ask them, and they told us anytime we needed to go there. They didn't like the media and other people going out there. But law enforcement, they pretty much would cooperate and let us go out there anytime. But common courtesy, we would always try to notify them when we were going. Did Dave Liebert have an alibi that day? Yes. I believe his wife. They were together at home? Yes. So he was in the vicinity for sure? Shaking your head, yes. Your position is, his alibi was, his wife saw him sitting on the couch or whatever? I don't know the exact specifics, but yes. Did you ask her to take a polygraph? Me personally, no. Whoever was the investigators, I believe they did, and neither one of them. I'd have to look at a list, but off the top of my head, I don't think either one of them took a polygraph. Do you know if you asked her and, maybe I missed this, but you asked her and she wasn't willing, or she just did, I think they obtained an attorney and the attorney advised them not to, or if I recall. Are you familiar with hate groups, extremist groups that Dave Liebert was associated with? No. Jimmy Dale Duvall. Do you know who that is? Yes. And do you know Jimmy Dale Duvall personally? No. You just know him from this investigation? Yes. Okay. Was he a suspect in this case? Yes, and tell me why. We received quite a few tips on him. I can't remember where he worked. I think over Chrysler maybe, if I remember correctly. And he had taken a day off that day. And so a lot of people from Chrysler were calling in tips on him, saying he shaved his head, he got a haircut, shaved his head, changed his appearance, and was off that day. So they assumed he did it. I think he had a criminal history that people knew about, and I don't know exactly what it was, but I think it was something to do with underage girls. But I'd have to refer to that. We got a lot of tips on sex offenders and things like that early on. But Jimmy Duvall cooperated. His alibi was his mother. His mother said he was home and he worked on his vehicle all day. Mom confirmed that he was home from like 12 to 6, and then she doesn't know for sure, but never saw him leave. But he pretty much all day had an alibi, and it was his mother. Let me ask you this kind of as a broad-based question. So every time that your team, I'll say, worked an alibi, it was always, it sounds like, based on what occurred between 12 and let's say 5 p.m. on that day? We had a time frame, I think it was a little bit bigger than that. How much bigger, I don't recall. I think it was maybe more like a couple of hours either way, 11 to 6, something like that. Yeah. Not into the dark hours, so to speak? No. And with Jimmy Dale Duvall, do you know if he took a polygraph? I don't think he did, no. I don't remember. Do you know if he was asked? I'm going to say that we had kind of a strategy. So if it was state police, and I can't remember with Duvall, asked for consent to get DNA, asked for consent to search anything digital, Asked him to take a polygraph. If you can't confirm their alibi, we could confirm a lot of people's alibis, so this one was obviously not as solid as others, but they would interview that person, say, hey, was he here? She did get interviewed, I remember that, I don't know by who. So we had a process that detectives were supposed to, but they're humans, we know how that works. But if they follow the process, then yes, he was offered. But I don't think he took one. He may have. Okay, was he associated with any extremist groups or religious radicals or anything like that that you're aware of? Not to my knowledge. Okay, so I cut you off, I'm sorry for that. So Brad Holder was, you're telling me then, was never really eliminated as a suspect because he wasn't? He was. He was. I think you told me, not to be technical, but you said he wasn't really a suspect. He wasn't really a suspect because we encountered him through his son, and his son was at school, and then we ended up talking to him. And you're throwing a lot at me, and I tried to review all this, but I believe Brad Holder was at work at the landfill. Which landfill? Liberty. Liberty landfill, where's that? I don't know. Okay, I'm not sure. You don't know how far away from the trail it is or how? No, it's not in this county. Okay, he was at work from sometime in the morning, early in the morning. He went to work early in the morning and didn't get off until after this time frame that I'm talking about. Did you ever polygraph him? I don't think so, no. Did anybody ever? Well, let me ask you this. Was he a part of any, extremist groups or hate groups or all these kind of questions I've been asking? Yes, yes, yes. Okay, tell me about that. He was involved with another gentleman named Patrick Westfall that we found out through this investigation that was into some, in my words, some cult type. What cult? I don't think it's really a cult, but just a different bizarre type religion. There's only like 8 people involved where they would worship other things other than God. But Patrick Westfall was non-cooperative and wouldn't really talk to us. But I believe he had an alibi. He said he was at home. So those two are connected. Okay, so Westfall and Holder? Where was Holder living at the time? I'd have to check the report. Somewhere local? No, Logansport area. I'm guessing Cass County. That's where her son went to high school, I believe, or middle school or whatever. Did Logan have any, I shouldn't say Logan, that was his son. Did Brad Holder have any direct contact with either one of these girls? I don't think he did. I think he knew very little about, we're talking 13, 14-year-old, in relationships. So I'm not sure they were going on dates and things like that. I think they were just talking to each other. I'm not talking about Logan, I'm talking about Brad Holder. That's what I'm saying, his son. It wasn't like she was over at the house all the time, or they were going on dates. It was more of a communication. Kids these days, and Snapchatting. That was their relationship. Do you know if they were ever in the same airspace? I mean, there's a connection here. Logan threw that in this case, Brad Holder accepted any responsibility for this act? No. That he said, hey, I was involved in this, or I know something about it, or anything like that? No. Absolutely not. Did anyone else ever communicate to you that Brad Holder was engaged in any kind of activities that would have drawn suspicion toward him regarding these acts? No. Okay. I'm going to just go back as quick as I can. Those last 2 questions I asked, anything with Jimmy Dale Duvall? No. Liebert? No. I think we covered the Klines. That's a little bit more broad. Ron Logan, that he was ever involved in anything suspicious? No. Or that would have caused you to believe he knew something about these crimes? No. And certainly didn't accept any responsibility for them? No, he did not. Did you work with, who was the officer or officers that focused on this kind of hate crime angle? We talked about this earlier today, right? This crime scene stuff. Who were the officers that kind of spent time focusing on that aspect of the case? Talking to the Purdue people, talking to the FBI people. That would have been Steve Buckley and Dave Vito. He didn't talk to the Purdue people because that was before, but he talked to the U.S. Marshals Behavior Analysis and relayed that information that we talked about earlier to Unified Command. Anybody else that would have worked? I think the right word would be angle of the case. Well, I mean, there were multiple troopers that thought they were Googling it, Experts know. The only experts I know that were contacted were the ones that we already discussed. Okay, do you remember any other troopers that were interested in this kind of stuff? There were several. I know we had, I can't think of his name. Nate, he works for Nick now. He was into some gang activities, stuff like that. We actually had him looking into some stuff for us and following up, but he never found anything. Nathan Myers, sorry. And there was, like I said, there were other officers that had no experience, but they were, going off of assumptions, I guess. Do you recall Winters ever coming to you and asking you about any of these hate crimes or hate groups and communicating with you about his concerns? Winters? Yeah. Ryan Winters? Trooper Winters? Yes. Okay, what do you recall about that? Basically that? And I told him we were covering that angle and that we had talked to people.
Yeah.
What about Murphy? Murphy, not so much. What about Purdy? Purdy, he thought it was. And there was another. What do you remember about Purdy? Same thing, he thought it was. What did you tell him? Same thing that I just told you, that it was a concern, but we'd already looked into it and we had professionals saying that it was not. What about this officer down in Terre Haute that was unfortunately killed? Ferenczi or something? Greg? Yeah, what about him? Did he ever come to you and communicate to you that he had concerns about hate groups being involved in any of this? I don't recall if he did, but I know he worked with us on some tips that were down there. I don't know if they were ever anything that was meaningful to you. Elvis Fields. Okay, we talked about Elvis Fields. Yeah, he's 14. We'll get there. Anybody else? I don't recall. Okay, maybe I already asked you this. We're going to finish with Brad Holder. Was he ever excluded as a suspect? The answer, I think, was yes. Yes. I should say this just to clarify. I don't really like your verbiage on excluded. We call it covered. We covered him. We exhausted every lead. He was at work. If we got new information on him, then we would open that back, which we've done on multiple people. So no one was ever fully excluded. We would say covered. That way, if we did get new information, at this time they're covered. But if tomorrow somebody calls and says something different, then we would. On everybody, you're going to ask me. Was Brad Holder covered? Covered. Jimmy Dale. Duvall covered? Yes. Yes. Dave Liebert covered? Yes. Tony Kline? Yes. Kegan Kline? Yes. Ron Logan? Yes. Let's talk about Rick Redhawk. Do you know Rut personally? No, I know. Was Rick Redhawk ever a suspect in this case? We received tips on him. I think he was one of the sex offenders, multiple sex offenders, we received tips on. I don't recall much about Rick Redhawk other than I know he was followed up on. So you don't have any independent recollection of him as you sit here today? Like, was he excluded? That's my word, but I'm asking the question so I can use whatever word I want. You can use it. I believe he was covered. Okay, and do you know who worked that angle of the investigation? I believe that was Tony Liggett, the county, I believe. Would Tony Liggett have been a party to conversations regarding these, what I've described as hate groups, extremist groups, in your, yes, I don't know. Is there anything about him other than what you just uttered that you remember as you sit here today? No, I do not. Patrick Westfall. Do you know him? Yeah, we talked about him a little bit already. Tell me how you know him. Brad Holder was in some sort of religious group with him. Yesterday we talked about a group called the Odinites, or maybe it was 2 days ago. I forget. Odinism? Odinism or something. Yeah, the words were used. Is that what you're talking about? I think that's what his focus was on. Something similar to Odinism. Him being who? Patrick Westfall. Was Patrick Westfall a suspect in this case? No, I wouldn't consider him a suspect. Can you explain to me what the investigation around him would have entailed? Because we knew Brad Holder, Logan Holder, that he was involved with him. And we found out we got tips that he was into that Odinism type religion. We kind of looked into that aspect. But Patrick Westfall was not cooperative. And I'm not talking about the not cooperative kind of cooperative, not cooperative. He was not cooperative. Like he didn't want any part of talking with the police? Nope. Did he react was he more than just resistant? No. He wasn't disrespectful or criminal towards us. He just was adamant that he didn't like the police and wasn't going to talk to us. Were you able to confirm that Brad Holder and Patrick Westfall were actually connected? Yes. That there was a relationship between the two of them? Yes. Brad acknowledged that. Where is Patrick Westfall from? I don't know where he's from. What do you know about the relationship between the two of them? Very little. Other than what was told was Brad was involved in that church. I call it a church. It was like 7 or 8 people that followed the same beliefs as Patrick. Those beliefs being what? The Odinism type stick formation and things like that. Some of the things that were of concern at the crime scene with the girls, similar. Yeah, did you ever receive information from any third parties about either one of these two guys? Now we're kind of talking about them in tandem. That they accepted any responsibility for this crime? No. Did you ever receive any information from any third parties, or even through law enforcement sources, that either one of them were engaged in any suspicious activity that might have been connected to the crime? Nope. Did you personally talk to either one of these guys? Yes. What do you remember about those conversations that maybe we haven't already talked about? Nothing. Just same thing. We would give updates on everybody. Hey, what can we do? What did we do? Things like that. Was there any connection between those two guys and anything unique at the crime scene? No. Other than what we talked about. And just to clarify, what is that? The Odinism, stick formation type thing was similar but not exact. Okay, how did this investigation with these two guys come to a conclusion then? What do you mean? Well, is it over? Are you still looking into this? No, we're not looking into it. There's nothing more for us to do on either one of those. They're covered? Covered. Thank you. Thomas Lincoln Wallace. What can you tell me about Thomas Lincoln Wallace? Was he a suspect? I can't remember on Thomas Wallace, to be honest with you. I didn't get that far in my, okay, you don't really have any independent recollection? No, I don't. So if I asked you most of these questions I've asked you about the other people, your answer is going to be, I really can't remember anything about Thomas Wallace at this point. I didn't get that far in reviewing last night. I'm sorry, I tried. Brad Weber? I do recall Brad Weber. Was he a suspect? No, I wouldn't call him a suspect, no. Was he a person of interest? I hate that phrase. He was staying at the property right above the crime scene in his parents' house, but he was covered as well. In your opinion, why was he covered? He was at work. We verified work records. He said he got home around 2:30, but we think it's later than that because he got off around 2. But then he also operates an ATM machine business, so he went and collected money from the ATMs, which would have taken a few minutes. So we think he got home a little bit later. Knew something about these crimes? No, and certainly didn't accept any responsibility for them? No, he did not. Did you work with, who was the officer or officers that focused on this kind of hate crime angle? We talked about this earlier today, right? This crime scene stuff. Who were the officers that kind of spent time focusing on that aspect of the case? Talking to the Purdue people, talking to the FBI people. That would have been Steve Buckley and Dave Vito. He didn't talk to the Purdue people because that was before, but he talked to the U.S. Marshals Behavior Analysis and relayed that information that we talked about earlier to Unified Command. Anybody else that would have worked, I think the right word would be angle of the case. Well, I mean, there were multiple troopers that thought they were Googling it, you know? Experts, no. The only experts I know that were contacted were the ones that we already discussed. Okay, do you remember any other troopers that were interested in this kind of stuff? There were several. I know we had, shoot, I can't think of his name. Nate. He works for Nick now. He was into some gang activity, stuff like that. We actually had him looking into some stuff for us and following up, but he never found anything. Nathan Myers, sorry. And there was, like I said, there were other officers that had no experience, but they were, going off of assumptions, I guess. Do you recall Winters ever coming to you and asking you about any of these hate crimes or hate groups and communicating with you about his concerns? Winters? Yeah. Ryan Winters? Trooper Winters? Yes. Okay, what do you recall about that? Basically that, and I told him we were covering that angle and that we had talked to people. Yeah, what about Murphy? Murphy, not so much. What about Purdy? Purdy, he thought it was, and there was another. What do you remember about Purdy? Same thing, he thought it was. What did you tell him? Same thing that I just told you, that it was a concern, but we'd already looked into it and we had professionals saying that it was not. What about this officer down in Terre Haute that was unfortunately killed? Ferenczi or something. Greg, yeah. What about him? Did he ever come to you and communicate to you that he had concerns about hate groups being involved in any of this? I don't recall if he did, but I know he worked with us on some tips that were down there. I don't know if they were ever anything that was meaningful to you. Elvis Fields. Okay, we talked about Elvis Fields. Yeah, he's 14. We'll get there. Anybody else? I don't recall. Okay, maybe I already asked you this. We're going to finish with Brad Holder. Was he ever excluded as a suspect? The answer, I think, was yes. Yes, I should say this just to clarify. I don't really like your verbiage on excluded. We call it covered. We covered him. We exhausted every lead. He was at work. If we got new information on him, then we would open that back, which we've done on multiple people. So no one was ever fully excluded. We would say covered. That way, if we did get new information, at this time they're covered. But if tomorrow somebody calls and says something different, then we would, on everybody you're going to ask me, was Brad Holder covered? Covered. Jimmy Dale Duvall covered? Yes. Yes. Dave Liebert covered? Yes. Tony Kline? Yes. Ron Logan? Yes. Let's talk about Rick Redhawk. Do you know Rick personally? No. I know. Was Rick Redhawk ever a suspect in this case? We received tips on him. I think he was one of the sex offenders, multiple sex offenders we received tips on. I don't recall much about Rick Redhawk other than I know he was followed up on. So you don't have any independent recollection of him as you sit here today. Like, was he excluded? That's my word. But I'm asking the question so I can use whatever word I want. You can use it. I believe he was covered. Okay. And do you know who worked that angle of the investigation? I believe that was Tony Liggett, the county, I believe. Would Tony Liggett have been a party to conversations regarding these, what I've described as hate groups, extremist groups in your, yes, I don't know. Is there anything about him other than what you just uttered that you remember as you sit here today? No, I do not. Patrick Westfall. Do you know him? Yeah, we talked about him a little bit already. Tell me how you know him. Brad Holder was in some sort of religious group with him. Yesterday we talked about a group called the Odinites, or maybe it was 2 days ago. I forget. Odinism? Odinism or something. Yeah, the words were used. Is that what you're talking about? I think that's what his focus was on. Something similar to Odinism. Him being who? Patrick Westfall. Was Patrick Westfall a suspect in this case? No, I wouldn't consider him a suspect. Can you explain to me what the investigation around him would have entailed? Because we knew Brad Holder, Logan Holder, that he was involved with him, and we found out we got tips that he was into that Odinism type religion. We kind of looked into that aspect. But Patrick Westfall was not cooperative. And I'm not talking about the not cooperative kind of cooperative, not cooperative. He was not cooperative, like he didn't want any part of talking with the police? Nope. Did he react was he more than just resistant? No. No. He wasn't disrespectful or criminal towards us. He just was adamant that he didn't like the police and wasn't going to talk to us. Were you able to confirm that Brad Holder and Patrick Westfall were actually connected? Yes. That there was a relationship between the two of them? Yes, Brad acknowledged that. Where is Patrick Westfall from? I don't know where he's from. What do you know about the relationship between the two of them? Very little, other than what was told was Brad was involved in that church. I call it a church. It was like 7 or 8 people, the same beliefs as Patrick. Those beliefs being what? The Odinism type, stick formation and things like that. Some of the things that were of concern at the crime scene with the girls? Similar, yeah. Did you ever receive information from any third parties about either one of these two guys? Now we're kind of talking about them in tandem, that they accepted any responsibility for this crime? No. Did you ever receive any information from any third parties, or even through law enforcement sources, that either one of them were engaged in any suspicious activity that might have been connected to the crime? Nope. Did you personally talk to either one of these guys? Yes. What do you remember about those conversations that maybe we haven't already talked about? Nothing. Just same thing. We would give updates on everybody. Hey, what can we do? What did we do? Things like that. Was there any connection between those two guys and anything unique at the crime scene? No, other than what we talked about. And just to clarify, what is that? The Odinism. Stick formation type thing was similar, but not exact. Okay, how did this investigation with these two guys come to a conclusion then? What do you mean? Well, is it over? Are you still looking into this? No, we're not looking into it. There's nothing more for us to do on either one of those. They're covered? Covered. Thank you. Thomas Lincoln Wallace. What can you tell me about Thomas Lincoln Wallace? Was he a suspect? I can't remember on Thomas Wallace, to be honest with you. I didn't get that far in my okay. You don't really have any independent recollection? No, I don't. So if I asked you most of these questions I've asked you about the other people, your answer is going to be, I really can't remember anything about Thomas Wallace at this point. I didn't get that far in reviewing last night. I'm sorry, I tried. Brad Weber? I do recall Brad Weber. Was he a suspect? No, I wouldn't call him a suspect, no. Was he a person of interest? I hate that phrase. He was staying at the property right above the crime scene in his parents' house, but he was covered as well. In your opinion, why was he covered? He was at work. We verified work records. He said he got home around 2:30, but we think it's later than that because he got off around 2. But then he also operates an ATM machine business, so he went and collected money from the ATMs, which would have taken a few minutes. So we think he got home a little bit later, within your time frame, but you still didn't put a lot of credence in that. Later, he said he went home, took a nap, and woke up by the search party later in the evening, around 5:30 or 6, I believe. I may be off on the time. So he might have been around from 3 to 5 or so, without any kind of firm alibi other than he said he was home? Absolutely. Which was close to the scene? It was on what you and I are calling the Weber side. Yes. So across the creek, any association with any hate groups or extremist groups? No. Did you ever receive any tips from any other third parties or outside parties saying, hey, this guy is somebody you really need to be looking at because he did this or did that, or he's acting this way? Not that I can recall, no. Daniel Nation? Do you know Daniel Nation? Personally? No. Was he a suspect? I wouldn't call him a suspect, but he was brought up because of a crime that occurred out in Colorado. What was that crime? He was on a trail and attempted to attack somebody with a hatchet or something. Was he from around here? He was from Indian. We put him in Indiana, but we could not get him near Delphi. His alibi was he was with his, I don't want to call her his wife. Baby mom, I don't know. His girlfriend or wife was pregnant. He was at a doctor's appointment during the time several hours away from here. He was from Indiana, but he was down south. So you think you were able to kind of clear his alibi, so to speak, covered him with all the knowledge that we had? An investigative would have been Jay Harper, And Steve Buckley went to Colorado and interviewed him and then interviewed other people as well. Do you know if he had any connection whatsoever to the trailhead at a certain time? He was working in Logansport with his mother. He's like an appraiser or something. Okay, and obviously when he got there, they didn't show up. So then he immediately started calling family members, and they went out on the trail looking for the girls. Was Derek German ever associated with any of these hate groups, fascist groups, extremist groups? Not to my knowledge, no. Any of the ones we talked about? No. Did Derek German have a criminal history that you were aware of? Yes, he did. What can you tell me about that? My personal past histories with him was he was involved in manufacturing methamphetamine. I don't know exactly what he got charged with, but I know he was recently released from the DOC. Did his history cause some concerns amongst your staff about his potential involvement in the case? Some concerns, yes, but we covered most of those. Did he ever work as a confidential informant for the police that you were aware of? Not that I'm aware of. Have you heard that come up before, that conversation or that comment? I have heard that, yes. You don't know the answer to that? No. He was never a confidential informant for me or anybody I work with. I'm not making this stuff up. It's something I've heard. Oh yeah. You've heard it. It's a strong possibility, but I don't know that. Were you aware of any tension or friction that existed within the family at the time of these incidents that would have caused you to believe that he might have been involved in this crime? The German family? Yes. Did you try? Yes. We interviewed him. We interviewed the sister. We interviewed his roommates. We interviewed multiple people. I'm not sure if he had a phone. I know he didn't have a vehicle or anything like that. But yeah, we exhausted every investigative lead on all these people. You said down here. I heard you say down here. Down here from where? Actually up here. Sorry. Okay. Connorsville area maybe. Did you personally talk to Elvis Fields? I sat in an interview with Kevin Murphy. Was Elvis Fields cooperative with your investigative team? I believe so, yes. Did you participate in any conversations with his sister? No, I did not. Was she cooperative with the team beyond giving you a tip? She was cooperative, but it was the investigators that talked to her were convinced that she had some mental issues. What were those? I'm trying to be nice and say mental issues. Be honest. They just said that she was crazy. 1096 was the term. I believe that she was just out there, and none of the information was making sense that she was giving them. What was the information? You'd have to ask. Kevin would know, or I'm not sure Jay interviewed her, but it was Rich Davies maybe too. We all went down there one day and did a lot of interviews, but I don't remember. Connorsville? I think it was Connorsville. Yeah, you went down there as a team? Yes? You're shaking your head yes? Yes. Sorry, when was this? Years ago, before COVID. And if you took a whole team down there, something piqued your interest, right? There's points where, we get information and we need to act fast, and there was multiple people to interview. So there was a roommate, him, a sister, and a mother. So we took basically probably 2 people per interview, and then maybe some extra, just in case we needed to go interview some other people. And did this just occur in a short period of time, kind of intense, for the team? Yeah. I mean, Purdy and Murphy worked it beyond that and before that, and when they were ready to go interview, we put together a team. We did that a lot. It's not uncommon. If there's multiple people to be interviewed, we would definitely do that quite a bit. Do you recall anybody else other than his sister providing you with information about him? There's a roommate, but he didn't have any information other than he thought he was. They had no transportation, no way to get down here, pretty much homeless. I think they were living in a trailer that shouldn't have been lived in, I'll say. So you're saying, generally speaking, you went down there kind of as a unit and then you kind of dismissed this as just not reliable? No. We continued to follow it up. Kevin did. The rest of the team moved on to other tips and leads. Was Kevin reporting to you what he was finding as he continued to follow up? Yes. What did he report to you? What I said earlier, that the sister was unreliable. 1096 wasn't making sense, changing her story. Are you familiar with any activities that Elvis Fields engaged in himself that would have connected him in any way with this particular crime scene? No. He was saying or doing anything that was like, we need to focus more on him? I think that's what the sister was saying. I'm talking about him. No, he denied everything, I'm pretty sure. Garrett Kurtz, do you know Garrett Kurtz? Know of him? Was Garrett Kurtz a suspect? We received tips on him. Same thing. I would consider same thing as like multiple, but you got a few here. As Daniel Nation, he committed a couple of crimes that people thought because he committed those crimes. He killed 2 girls here in Delphi as well, but he was eliminated pretty quickly. I don't remember. Alibi? I know he was interviewed by Tony Liggett and Dave Vito maybe, and a couple of other troopers from up north. Yeah, there was never ever any evidence connecting him to Delphi. Well, he did have connections here, but to the crime scene. Okay, what were his connections here? He had family and friends that lived in the area. Do you remember if he submitted to a polygraph? I think he did, as a matter of fact, and I think that was also conducted by Matt Collins, but I'd have to refer a lot of this. I'm going off of memory and summary, so I may be off a little bit. Are you aware of any connections that Garrett Kurtz had with either of the girls? No. What about from a social media standpoint? Ashley Garth. Do you know Ashley Garth? That one I don't recall anything about. So if I ask you all those questions, your answer is going to be, I don't know. I have no clue on that one. I could probably find some information, but I didn't have a chance. Do you know if that's a girl or a boy? I think it's related to Garrett Kurtz. I think it's a girl. I think it's his co-defendant that killed up in Newton County, so Garrett Kurtz killed his girlfriend. I think Ashley Garth was involved in that, but I don't know. In this day and age, it's tough to tell. Yeah, I get it. It's just odd there would be a woman on here. Nick's probably mad at me for rambling on about that because that's what I believe, but I can't confirm that. Gabe Ellis? I don't know Gabe Ellis. I think that's probably still involved with those other two that you just mentioned, but maybe connected? I don't recall Gabe Ellis at all. So if I ask you all those questions, your answer is going to be, I have no clue. You have no recollection. No recollection of Gabe. So let me ask this. So we've got a list here of about 17 people. Let me ask you this. Of these 17 people, which of them do you believe may or did have ties to any kind of extremist or fascist or hate groups? Just Patrick Westphal and Brad Weber. Sorry, Brad Holder? Ron Logan? No? I don't think so. I know you're not looking at the list, so I know. So I'm going to accommodate you. Kegan Kline? Tony Klein? No. Liebert? No. Jimmy Dale Duvall? No. Brad Holder? Yes. Rick Redhawk? I don't know. Michael David Schmidt? Don't know. Patrick Westphal? Yes. Thomas Lincoln Wallace? Don't know. Brad Weber? No. Daniel Nation? No. Derek German? No. Elvis Fields? Garrett Kurtz? No. Ashley Garth? No clue. Gabe Ellis? No clue. Okay, again, these are kind of broad, sweeping questions, but of this whole group of people, you mentioned that Holder and Westphal were connected, and you thought that Kurtz, Garth, and Ellis may be connected? Possibly. This is not a matching game, right? I get it. Are there any other players here that I've mentioned that you think are connected with some other person on the list? Just Tony and Kegan. Okay, yeah, that's a good point. So Tony and Kegan, right? And other than that, the only other connections would be Holder and Westphal, and then possibly Fields, Kurtz. Possibly Kurtz, Garth, and Ellis? Correct. You want to look at the list just to make sure? I trust you, okay? That's dangerous. Give me a few seconds here. Sure. I was thinking about Stephanie Thompson actually for other reasons earlier, and it kind of popped back in my head. She was involved in this case, right? Yes. And my understanding she was doing polygraph exams? Yes. Was she doing anything? Which technique was she using? I'm just curious. The preferred technique that the state police teaches. I don't know what it's called. All right. Was she doing anything else in terms of investigating this particular crime? Like, kind of typical investigative work? No. Groundwork? No. We just utilized her in the polygraph. With regard to these suspects that I've mentioned, that's my word, 17 of them. Did you ever polygraph any one of these? Anyone associated with these people? So like if somebody's wife came to you and said, my husband was responsible for this, did you conduct any polygraphs kind of at a second level, if you will? On that list, no. Do you want me to read the names again? No, I'm familiar with the list. We have done that. Okay, tell me for who. I know we interviewed or polygraphed a guy's mother. You're going to have to give me a minute. I'll think of it. I'll text you at 2 a.m. How's that? I don't give out my personal number. It's too dangerous. Give me a minute. I'll think of the name. Kenneth Johnson. Kenneth Johnson? I believe so. What was it? Why was Kenneth Johnson's mother being polygraphed? Kenneth Johnson worked at Indiana Packers. Took a day off. He was getting disciplined for pulling a pig's ear. For what? Pulling a pig's ear. That wasn't an expression? You're talking literally? Yes. Okay, go ahead. So there were some other people involved in that investigation, and they thought he was a registered sex offender. So they polygraphed him, and it was inconclusive. His alibi was his mother. Polygraphed his mother, and she passed. Said he was at home during the time frame. And then non-preferred technique or preferred technique. Preferred technique. And then he was repolygraphed later by Matthew Collins. I can't remember who did the first one, but he passed the second one. His mother passed the first one. That's the only time you kind of went second level here in terms of polygraph? That I can remember, yeah. Okay, let's take a break real quick. A recess was taken. Let me revisit a couple of things. Let's talk about Muddy Bloody Guy. Do you know what I'm talking about? I do. So my recollection, just so we can set the table here, is that Sarah Carbaugh saw this guy that she described as being muddy and bloody, right? You generally agree with that? Yes. And that this particular person was first seen somewhere between the Mears farm and the cemetery, I think yes, is kind of what I gather from talking to people. With regard to that experience that Sarah Carbaugh had, was there ever any surveillance video that reflected or corroborated? Probably a better word. What she said she saw? Video, no. The only thing, we have her phone dat she was in the area at the time she said she was, and she's the only one that saw the person. And that person must have went behind the Hoosier Harvest store if he was walking that way, because we do not have him on camera going that way. Is that what you're asking? Well, yeah. So what is your opinion about the direction of travel of that person after Sarah Carbaugh saw the person? What I just said. So you're talking about north. There's many options, obviously, but she sees him walking. I don't know what direction that is. From the cemetery towards Mears. So we're assuming he's going that way. That's the witness statement. And we know she was there because we have phone dat. So he could have, after she left, he could have went back the other way. He could have went back and around Hoosier Harvest store, over towards where the old CPS building is. I mean, there's multiple options. We do not have him on video going across, so he had to go some different direction. That's all I know. Even back down to the trail? Potentially. Do you recall anyone? I guess primarily Sarah Carbaugh. Did she say with any specificity where she last saw this person? No, other than what we've already discussed, which was on 300? Between the cemetery and Mears, walking towards Mears. Are you aware of any eyewitness testimony that said or that established that that person was anywhere else other than on 300? No. In the cemetery, in the woods, behind a barn, down the road, in a driveway, anything like that. Only on the bridge. All pretty important facts in this case. Yes. I don't have any further questions. I think Andy is going to ask a few. Thank you. I'm Andy Baldwin. I'm trying to get a feel for this unified command situation. Sure, we've heard who was in the unified command. Initially, yeah, it was myself and Jay Harper, Kevin Hammond, Tony Liggett, Rich Davies, and Mike Peasley from the FBI. So 2 FBI, 2 state, 2 county, and then Steve Mullen from the city. He was the chief at the time. And then Prosecutor Rob Ives was also involved. And that was unified command initially. And then, if you can tell me kind of what it morphed into over time, sure. Rich Davies and Mike Peasley, obviously Rich retired from the FBI. Mike Peasley was transferred to Washington, D.C. or Virginia or something like that. Kevin Hammond retired. So that left Tony Liggett, me, Jay Harper, Steve Mullen, and then we added Dave Vito, and then Prosecutor McClellan took over shortly after Rob Ives left, and that was unified command. Okay. And was there any more changes other than those that you just described? I don't think so. I think that's all I remember. Is unified command still in existence? Yes. Okay, so that last crew that you said, that's the group that are involved in unified command? That would be who I would consider the current unified command. How often are they meeting? We don't meet as often as we used to. We meet, we don't have it every week, every month. If something comes up, either Prosecutor McClellan will send out an email and say, hey, can we meet on this day, or vice versa? I'll say, hey, I got some information I'd like to share, or anybody with unified command, and we might invite other people, like lab, forensic scientists and things like that. But I would say probably once a month still. I can't remember the last time we met, but it was probably a month ago. At its height, how often would unified command? Every day. Every day we'd meet in the morning, talk about what had happened and what our plans are moving forward, allocating any resources, time, money, going over stuff like that. Where was the meetings? Was it a specific place or was it at different places? Well, it moved a couple of times, but we called it unified command. So the command center started out at the Delphi Police Department. Above the police department, there's a conference room and kitchen and stuff we used. Then we moved over to what was referred to as the old RMC building, and we were in there for quite some time. And then we moved back temporarily to the police department. And then now we're at an off-site location. I don't know the actual address. Here, just outside of Delphi. And the reason I'm asking is because sometimes when there's meetings, you go down to the diner and you have a cup of coffee. No. It was all private secured locations with law enforcement only. Was it in a place where you could look at technology like things on computers, or was there a big screen so you could look at anything that you needed to look at if there was anything of interest? Yep. Okay. And who was kind of in charge of the technology side of it, if anybody? Steve Mullen, probably I'd say, is the most proficient in technology. Okay? And I'm trying to get an understanding of these people that go out, the detectives and the different agencies that are investigating. I even saw some like up in Hammond, Indiana, I think. If you're up in Hammond, Indiana, how do you get involved in a case like this if you're a police officer up there? Couple of different ways. Probably maybe a task force officer come down here to help us. But also to save time and resources, we would reach out to, for example, if there was a person we got a tip on in Peru, I would reach out to Bob Burgess and say, hey, Bob, could you follow up on this and establish alibi and things like that? If anything else, contact us and we'll jump in and help out. So we utilize not only state police, but some other local, and then the FBI out of state we've used. We get tips out of state. We wouldn't always go, we'd reach out to the FBI or the state police in Florida or wherever. Denver, we went to Denver, we have sent people places, but we don't, because like I said, always send people places. Just because we get a tip doesn't make you a suspect. So it could be they could follow up on that very quickly for us and eliminate them as a suspect. You said the word task force. Was that Greg Ferenczi on task force? Yeah, I don't know what it stands for. Grit? Right. Oh, okay. There's one up north, there's one down south, so it's FBI, state police, other local officers are put on this task force. Did you know Greg Ferenczi before this case? No. Did you ever get to meet him? I did. How did you get to meet him? Through some of the tips he was following up for us down there in that area. And that brings me to, did you have special guests come in and update you on things? You said experts or maybe scientists or something like that would come in and talk. What about detectives? We're talking, Murphy was working on aspects of, I think, the Odin side of it, the Odin allegations or the Odin whatever. Yeah. Did Murphy ever come in and give a full accounting of whatever his investigation involved? I'm not sure if Murphy did, but we had multiple officers come in and instead of us try to read their reports or whatever, they would update us on their investigations. How would it be determined for you? Who's probably a busy guy? What am I going to read? How do I prioritize what I'm going to focus my energy on? Utilize the investigators. They tell me what they feel, and it may change. Right now, this Brad Rossi guy looks really good. So you should probably follow up on this. And they would tell me, and then I would read the report. So like you said, there's multiple officers. I'm in charge. My normal job is to read all of the police reports that come through District L4, which keeps me pretty busy. But, you're talking now L0 officers or whatever, and I'm only getting the state police on my RMS, then I have to get hard copies of others, so other people help me out as far as reviewing those. What about emails? Is there don't email me? I don't need my box all inundated with emails. I actually stayed off the email tip line. Is that what you're talking about? Well, I'm just saying, I'm sure you have an email. If Murphy or Purdy would send you an email, would you look into it? Oh, yeah, absolutely. I always respond to emails. But what was the preferred method for you? Verbally. Call me. Meet with me. I want to talk about some of these officers. I don't know what the right phrase is. I'll just call them law enforcement officers to see what your thoughts are on them and how well you knew them. Winters. Joseph Winters. He worked at Lafayette. I was actually one of his FTOs. He transferred down south. He was one that the state police sent up here to help during the initial push, when we were getting a lot of tips. Do you trust Joseph Winters? Yeah. Do you trust his opinion on the importance and value of evidence? Yeah, Ferenczi, I know he's deceased, but did you trust? From what you knew of him, did you trust his? Yeah, I didn't know him all that well, but yes. Murphy, how well did you know Murphy? I knew of him before this, but then he was assigned down here because he was one of the grit guys. Got to know him pretty well. Yeah, I trust him. He did a really good job following up on tips and leads. And if he came to you and said, hey, I think it is important, that would mean something to you? Yes. If Murphy said that, yes. Yes. I'm sorry. Sometimes when I use a pronoun and then I'll have to go back because I don't want to figure out who I was talking about. Purdy. Roland Purdy, how did you feel? Did you know him? Not before this, I didn't. Did you feel from your working with him that he did a good job? He's not as reliable as others. No. Okay. All right. And if he said, hey, I think something's important, would that be something you would pay attention to? Oh, absolutely. We would definitely look into it. And Stephanie Thompson, did she do anything else other than polygraph, or was she just polygraph as far as I know? Did you have any reason to believe she was not a good polygraph? No, she was absolutely excellent. Her and I were very close, and I would trust her with my life. Let me phrase it this way. You said it earlier that part of a polygraph examination is to get a feel for whether the person is telling the truth or to determine whether they're telling the truth, right? Yes. But the other part of it is, and I know this from doing this so long, this is where our clients sometimes crash and burn because they say a bunch of crap during the polygraph examination, which I think is part of why you do a polygraph examination. Is that fair to say? That's not a very well, you're trying to gain information from this out of the mouths of these people that can be used. Like I said earlier, it's definitely a tool that we use, and there is a pre-interview before the actual polygraph. The pre-interview is where you gain some information, and then there's a post-interview after they say he's deceptive, not deceptive, inconclusive, whatever. You go back and re-interview them if they're willing to clear things up. And if a polygraph examiner hears something during a polygraph examination that they think is of importance, would they normally come to you and say, hey, this guy told me this during the polygraph exam? Normally. And if you're the investigator, if I'm investigating Brad Rodsey, and I'm going to be watching the polygraph and pre-polygraph, and I'm there to answer questions or whatever. So yeah, you think Stephanie Thompson, if she were to hear something during a polygraph examination of somebody that she felt was important in this case, that she would go to the right people to tell them? I think so. Yeah, do you think that Sarah Carbaugh is a credible witness? I do. Do you know if she has changed her description of who she saw on 300 North, heading westbound? I don't think she changed it. I think she clarified some things. But Tony Liggett would be the one that interviewed her. Betsy Blair. You think she's credible? Yes. I listened to Robert Ives on a podcast at one point in time, and he said, I think it was after you had left, that there were at least 3 signatures left at the crime scene. Do you agree with that? I have no clue what he's talking about. Like somebody signed their name signature? You'd have to ask Rob Ives. Do you know what a signature for a crime is? I mean, I know like serial killers. Some people would leave. How do you have a signature in one crime? I don't know what he's talking about, what signatures are. No, I don't believe that Rob Ives knows what he's talking about. Okay? Well, I'll tell you what I think he's talking about, whether it's good or bad, is that a signature is something that is left behind at a crime scene or a murder scene. That is important because later on, if the secret of the crime scene has been kept and somebody talks about something that was at the crime scene, the signature that was left behind, then you might be able to connect the two. Okay? Is that something that you think could have happened here? I don't know, as I necessarily agree with your definition of a signature. Sure. But what I talked about with Brad earlier is, yeah, we definitely want to keep the evidence. So there's evidence we don't want to get out because only certain people know what happened. 2 are dead. But that's not a signature to me. That's just the evidence that they left behind. Signature me would be smiley face killer. This or that. He always leaves a smiley face at every crime scene or something. That's a signature to me. What was on the tree at the crime scene? It looked like a hand swipe. Some people refer to it as the F tree, but again, that was also analyzed by the BAU. Purdue professor, we forgot to talk about that. Brad didn't ask me about that, but that was all. That was all in that same evaluation with the sticks and everything else, and they all said it's not. They're not going to leave any question to. It is basically what? If they're leaving a signature or if they're leaving a sign that it was a hate crime, you're going to know it, and that you couldn't tell. It looked like maybe they cleaned something off. It wasn't distinctly enough to be what you would consider a signature, I guess. What are the odilties? What do you call the things that they use? You said a star. Have you ever heard of any names of what their alphabet is? No, because honestly, the Odinism thing to me was covered by the Purdue professor. Other people would bring it up. It would be in the back of my mind. If something come up in the investigation, there were some people that had weird photos on their Facebook, so we would look into that. But to me, I'm going to tell you that through our investigation, my opinion is I agree with the Purdue professor, I agree with the BAU, I agree with the other 2 that came up and analyzed the evidence, and I agree with the U.S. Marshal Bowe. It's not a hate crime. It's not something that, now, would we look into it if something comes up? Absolutely. So your then thinking is based upon these experts, Odinism had nothing to do with that crime scene? That's what I believe. Did you ever look at anybody, experts, try to find experts that might push back on those? And the sticks on top of her, you don't think, according to your experts, they're not formed into anything other than, what did you call it, covering? Undoing. Undoing. Undoing, is that right? Yeah, some people say he got interrupted, was trying to cover them up. I don't know if I necessarily agree with that. I agree with the undoing portion, because the way the sticks are, I don't see any formations, stars, or letters, or anything. Have you ever seen this? I'm going to mark this as Exhibit B. Defendant's Exhibit B was marked for identification. Yep, okay. So can you describe what that is for the record? Looked like a poorly drawn asterisk on somebody. Do you know whose website that was on, or Facebook page? It looks like Brad Holder. Yeah. April the 17th, 2017? Yes? Okay, Exhibit C marked. So you're familiar with that, is that right? You're familiar with Exhibit B? I'm sure I've seen this before, yeah. I've got these now side by side. So Brad Holder, it looks like to me, about 4 or 5 weeks after these girls are murdered, has put on his hand, or on somebody's hand, what you would call an asterisk. Maybe you might call it that. We call that a Hagal rune, or Hagal rune. Have you ever heard of Hagal? No. Okay, what do you think of that? I mean, it's a stretch that you could say that's the exact same formation. And that's what a lot of people are doing. But I'm going to stick by what the experts told me, because I'm no expert in this, and the experts tell me that you would not have a question, because that doesn't look exactly like that, which is closer, that the two side-by-sides there in Exhibit C, or the Sketch L and Sketch 2, which looks more like the other. Sketch L and 2 to me. Sketch L and 2? Yeah, that doesn't look any closer to that formation than two white males similar age and build. And this photo leaves out a stick. It does. Stick right here, going across here. That's not in there, so nothing to see there, right? I don't agree with the analogy, I guess. So there is something to see? Is there something to see there or not? Well, obviously there's pictures in front of me to see, but you're not going to convince me that that's the same drawing. Through my experience and the information I've got from the professionals, that doesn't look anything like whatever you called that. But Sketch L and 2 do look like. I think Sketch L and 2 look similar, yeah. I'm going to send you D. I'm sorry. Can you tell me what D is? D is a picture of a tree with blood splattered on it with blood rubs, blood drops. Is that from the crime scene? Yes, it is. You're familiar with it? I am. I'm sending you E. I'm going to represent to you. Have you seen that before? I think so, yeah. I think this is what we talked about earlier, what people had pictures on. We'd get tips about people having weird formations and things on there. Yeah. Now I'm going to give you the side-by-side. Yeah, that's off of Brad Holder's page. Right? Yes. You've seen that? Absolutely. Here's a side-by-side. Do you think those look alike? I can see a little bit of similarities there, but like I said from our professionals, it would be no question. And this kind of looks like an F over here. This kind of looks like, I think it's kind of an F. Did you ever give the experts, as you call them, any of these photos that I've provided to you off of Brad Holder's website or Facebook page? I don't know. To compare them, I don't know. Should you have done that if you didn't? Not necessarily. Because Brad Holder's been eliminated because he was at work. You ever heard of a guy named Charles Manson? I do know. I don't know him personally. Was he present at the crime scenes? Not all the time. No, I don't think so. Did anybody in Unified Command ever think, I wonder if that alibi is accurate, that maybe, just maybe, that Holder was directing other people? Did that conversation ever happen? Oh yeah, absolutely, it did. Yeah, apparently that was ruled out as a possibility. There's no evidence. We have no evidence indicating that he was commanding people to go kill people. I mean, ask Richard Allen if Brad Holder told him to go kill the girls. I mean, you guys communicate with the guy that killed the girls. If I was talking to the guy that killed those girls, I would be sure to ask that. You have. Absolutely you have. I believe that you think that. I know that. All the evidence indicates clearly that. Do you know what tunnel vision is? I do. I preached about not getting tunnel vision, and we have given you thousands of pages of reports that we focused on many different people. So tell me about Amber Holder. Do you know about her? Very little. I'll tell you a story about Amber and see if you know this story. Amber Holder, this is from your police reports, okay? Has said that she started dating Brad. Tell me if you know the story, because I don't want to belabor it, but she started dating Brad Holder in late February 2017, about a week or two before he had ended a friendship with Patrick Westfall. Do you know that story? Familiar. I'd have to review the report you're referring to see if you're being truthful with me. Okay, I got it. Are you going to have him review the report now? Sure. Do you want to take a break so I can go and take care of my other obligations in court? Sure, absolutely. Sounds like it's going to take him 15, 20 minutes to do that. He can read the whole thing in 15, 20 minutes. If you need to know where I'm particularly talking about, it's on page 9, I believe. Yes, 9. But if you want to read the whole thing, because I might be asking you questions about everything. A recess was taken. Defendant's Exhibit G was marked for identification. So you've just spent the last several minutes reading what we've marked as Defendant's Exhibit G, which will be attached and made a part of this deposition. You've said off record that you've never seen that document before? It looks like it's in a Word document, not State Police report, which is what you guys have right there. The one in front of you. The one in front of Mr. Razi, those State Police reports. This looks like a Word document. Word documents don't come to me. I'm familiar with some of the information in here, but I've never seen this report. Let's go through some of the stuff. I want to figure out what you are and are not familiar with. Okay? Were you familiar with Amber Holder's story? Yes. So Amber Holder tells a story about how the friendship between Brad Holder and Westfall ended because of something that happened in a ritual in the woods by a creek sometime in mid-February, correct? Yep. Page 9, is that where you're at? Yes. You were aware of that before today? I was not aware of all of it. I was aware that Amber was interviewed. I haven't seen this. I was aware that Amber was saying that there was a falling out between Patrick because of the ritual that went wrong. Did you know the time frame of that ritual that went wrong that Amber Holder spoke about to the state trooper about was around the same time as the girls were murdered? No, I did not recall that. Does that bother you? Yeah, it bothers me. Okay, now we're on to something. Did you know that this ritual that she talked about on page 9 of Exhibit G took place in the woods near a river? No. Does that bother you? Yep. What, if anything, are you going to do about it? Well, I'm going to search for more state police reports. Find out why this report wasn't submitted through the RMS system. Why this was given like this, and I think that would probably be Murphy and Purdy, can answer more questions, see if there possibly was more follow-up on Westfall and these individuals that I don't know about. Did Murphy ever tell you, or did anybody from Purdy or Ferenczi, did they ever tell you that story about what Amber Holder said? Like I said, I'm familiar with parts of it. I remember hearing some of it, but not the details that you're talking about. I would presume if you heard those details it would have triggered something in how you would handle it? Could have been. When somebody else, when was this? Do you know when this was submitted? When it was what? Submitted. All I can tell you is this is the document I got from Discovery. All right? That's what I'm saying. This isn't in RMS form, so I wouldn't get to review it. And there was a period of time when I was in Washington, D.C., when Bob Burgess was reviewing reports. I've never seen this report. Like I said, it's not an official. I appreciate that you're bothered by the form of the report. I do. Are you bothered more by the form of the report, or the fact that you didn't know that Amber Holder told a story that in mid-February, Brad Holder and Patrick Westfall had a falling out over something that happened by a river in the woods in some type of ritual? I'm bothered that I didn't know all the details. I knew the Cliff Notes version where I knew Patrick Westfall and Brad Holder had a falling out. I recall that. Had you ever heard of Johnny Messer? No. You don't know who Johnny Messer is? I've never heard that name. To this very day, you don't know who Johnny Messer is? I've heard some of these names in here that we're referring to, but Johnny Messer is not on my radar. It doesn't mean I haven't heard it, but you gotta take in consideration, I got about 100,000 names through my head. Sure. And I studied the ones that you guys provided, and those weren't provided, so I didn't have a chance to look up, like the email that I got from Miss Rodzi allowed me to look up those reports and have me familiar with. That's why I was able to give as much information about those people. But I didn't get these names. Elvis I did. Brad I did. But not whatever else. I can tell you there's 3 things minimally that place Elvis Fields in Delphi. 3. Okay, I'm going to tell you one of them. All right, Johnny Messer. You would have to confirm that with Mr. Murphy. Trooper Murphy and Trooper Purdy, because they're the ones that did the investigation, and never did they tell us that he had a direct connection with this Mr. Messer guy you're referring to that I recall. What is his connection to Delphi? Well, Messer is one of the recruiters for the Odenalties, and he's from Rushville, which is down south. Elvis was from Connorsville. He's from Rushville. Okay. Well, I'm pretty sure we met him down around Connorsville. Does that bother you that there's a connective tissue between Delphi and Elvis Fields down in Rushville? I don't think that proves anything at this point. You're just telling me. I'm not asking you whether it proves anything. I'm asking you whether you're bothered by it. Not really. I think I can look into it and probably find some reports that were more accurate and in a timely manner that was followed up on. So you think this is inaccurate? What's contained in? I mean, I just don't like that it's in a Word document. We're not supposed to submit these in Word documents. We're supposed to use our RMS so they can be, this was never approved by whoever. So it would be me, Sergeant Buckley. This information was never reviewed by me. Did you ever hear that? I guess I know the answer to this. I think Johnny Messer. Taylor Hornaday let Johnny borrow her car on Valentine's Day 13th and 14th time frame. When he came back from being up here in Delphi, he had blood in his car. On his car? Just what I read in that very little. Does that bother you? I mean, it doesn't bother me. It concerns me a little bit. It concerns you a little bit? Yeah. Are you trying to convince me that somebody else killed the 2 girls? I'm going to try to convince you that Richard Allen killed these girls. I know you are. I know you are. And I know what you're trying to do. I'm not trying to do anything I'm not going to admit to, other than let you start investigating this finally. Oh, we've been investigating it, sir. Well, How do you not know about this thing? You don't even know about this? Because this is not a state police official document, it would not have went through me. Told you that multiple times. Let's talk about a document that you are familiar with, okay? Defendant's Exhibit H was marked for identification. Here's H. Before I give it to you, have you ever heard of Ryan Butcher? Sounds familiar? Do you know who he is? I know a lot of people. Do you have a picture of him? No. Go ahead and read that. Take a second. Yep, I am familiar with this, yeah. So that is Exhibit H that I'm referring to, correct? Yes. So now that you've reviewed it, does that refresh your recollection? Yes. I remember talking to Ryan Winters about this. I remember reviewing this report and passing information on. Whether Brad Holder was re-interviewed, I don't know. At that time, we were having a lot of tips, and this may have been put back with that information. I'd have to review more reports to see if we have anything else. Do you remember the part there where it says, the provided media is on page 2 of Exhibit H? The provided media pictures show unknown young girls believed to be deceased with sticks placed over their bodies? Yep. You ever look at that photo? I did not look at it. I believe that the people that were working on this Odinism thid, we had those people looking at it. Defendant's Exhibit 1 was marked for identification. So you were aware of it when you talked to Winters, you were aware of the photo, correct? I don't know if I was aware of it at the time, or if this sparked my interest. But yeah, I knew they had some photos, which I mentioned that earlier, that they had odd photos and things like that. But you don't remember looking at it? I've looked at a lot of photos, I more than likely did, but I don't remember. We didn't get it in discovery, at least we didn't see it. So we drove down to Georgia and interviewed Mr. Boucher. Okay, and this is what he says that he repeated to Winters. Have you looked at that? Have you seen that? I don't think I have. No, I may have. That's Exhibit Y marked, correct? It is. Defendant's Exhibit J was marked for identification. Are you being serious? I mean, you don't look at that and think that has anything to do, that's even worth investigating Brad Holder? We did. Okay, and when was Brad Holder covered? You'd have to look at the reports. I don't know. You'd have to look at it. Was he being looked at in October of 2017? October of 2017, I was at the FBI National Academy in Quantico, Virginia, and Bob Burgess was in charge of the investigation until December when I got back. I know before that he was. Okay, so after that, while other people were in control of the investigation during that time frame, you'd have to ask them, you were actually involved in the interview of Elvis down in Rushville or Connorsville? Yep, I was present with Kevin Murphy. That's what I stated earlier. It was videotaped, wasn't it? I believe so. Don't have it? Do you know where it is? You have to ask Kevin Murphy. Elvis turns around. I'm reading off of that February 2018. Were you in a vehicle with Murphy? Did you guys drive down there together? No, we did not. Had you ever heard this story? Not a story, it's right out of his report. Elvis turned around when he dropped him off at his trailer. When Murphy did, Elvis then turns around and comes back to Murphy's car, and Elvis asks Murphy that if his spit is found on one of the girls, but it could be explained away, would he still be in trouble? I do recall that. Yes, you've heard that before? Yes, I do. What do you think about that? I'm pretty sure Kevin Murphy would be able to tell you that he followed up on it. And quite positive we got his DNA again. You say they can be put there, but I don't believe that you can put Elvis on the bridge, near the bridge. No, I do better than that. Okay, I put him at the crime scene. Okay, I don't. Well, you sure don't. Nope, but I do put Richard Allen at the crime scene. Go ahead. Tell me how that happened. Ask questions. It's your deposition. You've already gone through it. What links to the crime scene are there? Other than the magic bullet, what else is there? Eyewitness testimony, his own admission that he was near the crime scene, and then whatever you call it, magic bullet, I call evidence indicating that a round from his gun was within inches of a girl that was brutally murdered. I want to talk about that bullet too. I have not seen one single solitary photo of that bullet outside of 3/4 of it being covered in the ground. Do you know if that bullet was ever photographed outside of the ground? Okay, I'm going to need to get those photos. They should be in Discovery. Keep looking, I guess. Anything else about the Delphi supplemental report that was... Let's go through very quickly what you had not heard. A1EB? Elvis's alibi? What do you think about that? Did he have a pretty solid alibi? I wouldn't. I'd have to review the report and see what I don't know what your version of alibi is. Tell me what you think. Well, I don't have the report right here, but I'd have to look at the report too. I'm sure of it, but I'll just tell you that. Do you know who Rod Abrams is? You do? I do. Yes. Rod Abrams claimed that he, Elvis, and Ned Smith were up in Muncie, and that was found to be not true. Yes, I do know that we were able to validate that. Why did Rod Abrams lie? I don't know why he lied. Did you ever do this in police practice, where you get 3 guys in 3 different rooms and say somebody is going to talk, and that's going to be the person that gets the deal. Deals coming around one time to one person. Who's talking? Is it going to be you? Have you ever done that? No, I have not. You haven't? No. You don't think that's an appropriate thing to do? No. Really? No. Did you ever think about rounding up Elvis or having anybody round up Elvis and Rod Abrams in 2 different rooms and talking to them about what happened? I'm pretty sure they were talked to about what happened, but were they played off of one another since the alibi of Rod Abrams was found to be not true? I know that Jay Harper and Kevin Murphy and those guys interviewed them and talked about it. I don't know if they used that tactic that you mentioned. I would not use that tactic. Why not? I don't know. It's just not a tactic I would use at that point. Rod Abrams, your alibi is bad. We know that it's not true. Tell us what happened. Maybe that did happen, I don't know. You're looking at the reports, I'm not. And we could probably find more reports that maybe you need to refresh on too, I guess. I don't know. Is this going to be a situation where you're going to be blaming Murphy and others? No, I'm not blaming anybody. I'm just saying it's not my report. I was there. I remember everything that you just mentioned. But for more detail, we'd have to look at the other reports, see if there's any other reports on it. Does Exhibit G, I think it is, the 12-page? Yeah, we call it the Odin Report in our office, the 12-page Odin Report. Does that get you like thinking, man, I need to get back out and start investigating, I need to look at some things, but again, I will definitely follow up that you will look into them, you're going to follow up on Exhibit G from this deposition. Absolutely. Can I get a copy of this? Yeah, absolutely. I got you a copy right here. Thank you, sir. That's all the questions I have for now. 1 second. Officer Holeman? Trooper Holeman. First of all, I'm kind of listening to this exchange with this report that Mr. Baldwin has referenced. Do you have some reason to believe, or are you concerned that somehow we put together a report on our own and are giving it to you? No, I don't believe that. I believe maybe it came from Ferenczi, maybe he summarized what him and Murphy and Purdy were doing. Maybe that's why I haven't seen this. If Purdy and Murphy did this report, I wouldn't expect them to do this, because this is not our standard operating procedure on how to turn in a report. I just want to make sure it's not that I didn't see it. I know you haven't looked at the whole thing. Yeah, I skipped around. You're not suggesting that we somehow concocted this report for purposes of today? No, I'm just telling you I've never seen this report, and it's not in the standard state police report format. And maybe it was made by Greg Ferenczi, I don't know. It doesn't really say. But I'll find out, and I'll look into all the information in here, and I'll see if we already followed up on it. If we did, I'll provide those reports. If not, we will. So let's just talk about, let me make sure I'm clear. Let's talk about Brad Holder. Okay? Okay. So you acknowledge that Brad Holder was a suspect in this case? I said that, yeah. He was a person of interest. You were looking at him with some interest, right? Yes or no? Yes, and that was around the time of the circumstances, the murders that occurred in this case, right? It was early, yes. And at some point, this guy named Brian Boucher apparently reached out to some of your people to communicate some things that he had learned, right? Yes or no? Yes. And based on what's at least in the report that he offered up these images and photographs and things, I think there's even a reference in the Winters report that there was a Dropbox attachment. Did you see that at the bottom? I did. Did you guys have a Dropbox that you used? I believe so, yes. And did that Dropbox, was that a place like a central repository? Sounds like an old phrase from a Kennedy story, but is that what it was, where people could access it and get information easily? I believe so. I've used Dropbox occasionally, but not very often. Okay. And is it fair to say that whatever he would have given you in this meeting, whether it was these images or other things, that it would have been accessible to your team? Yeah, and to the extent that the report mentions that there are formations on those girls' bodies, these stick formations that are consistent with these images that were uploaded, would that have caught your attention immediately? I'm sure we've seen this. Yeah. Well, I'm asking, have you seen that? Yeah, I've seen this photo before, not him. You're familiar with that photo? You're talking about Exhibit 1? My vision's bad, but that's what you're talking about, right? I've seen I believe it was in a screenshot form off of somebody's webpage. I didn't see this actual, definitely similarities between I and the one below it. I can't read the letter, right? A few. I'm not suggesting that I is a real photograph, but there are similarities clearly between the circumstances and the way the bodies are laying and things like that, right? Yes, enough that if you saw that in the course of your investigation, you would be like, we need to look into this? And we did. Did you go back to Brad Holder and talk to him about Image I? Me personally, no. Do you have any recollection of anybody doing that? I'm going to look into it and I'll find out and let you know. Are you aware that in your report, one of the reports, that it was actually referenced that Logan Holder dumped his phone and sold his vehicle around the time of these murders? Who did, Logan Holder? The son? Yeah, I believe that sounds familiar. Would that cause you some concern? Yes. Did you follow up on that? Me? Personally, no. I'll look into it and find out. And with regard to these sticks here, which would be referenced, this is a terrible way to do this, but on Exhibit F, you've seen these before, right? You're not disputing that this image on the left, the comparison, came from Holder's Facebook page, right? I'm not disputing that, no. And the image on the right is clearly the one that was at the crime scene? That is correct. You've already acknowledged to Mr. Baldwin that there's some similarities there? Yes. And again, starting to put the pieces together, each of these individually doesn't necessarily mean a lot, but when you start to kind of join them, it definitely warrants some response, doesn't it? I'll look into it for you, and I believe we did respond, yes. Now let's talk about Patrick Westphal again. Okay, are you aware that in your own reports there's references that Patrick Westphal and Brad Holder frequented this trail together? No. This is not a state police report. I'm asking you if you're aware that that's been reported to your law enforcement agencies, any of your investigation. Are you referring to G? I don't know if it's in that report. I'm saying, are you aware that that has been reported to your investigative team? That those two guys had spent time on that trail? I don't recall that, no. Would that be something that you think would stand out to you? Yes, and I think we covered this earlier, but are you aware that the two of them have openly communicated via social media that they're involved in this Odin group? Yes. Not really any dispute about that? No. And are you aware that there was actually a video that was offered up to one of your investigators? I think Mr. Baldwin mentioned this earlier, of Brad Holder conducting a pagan ritual where they were marking a tree? I don't recall that? No. If it's in your police reports or in your investigative materials, would you have any reason to dispute that that occurred? I would want to read it and make sure it's true and accurate, what you're saying it says. You haven't heard anything about that? No. A fact that if you heard, would probably stand out in your mind? I think that would, yeah. He asked you about Amber Holder. You know she cooperated with the police, right? Right? She was basically an informant as it relates to her former husband, right? That you were investigating? Yes. And at one point, she actually told your investigators that he was drunk one night and was telling her about how he was in the woods conducting a ritual with Westphal. I don't know who wrote that report, but yeah, I recall hearing information about Amber's information. Near a river? Yes. All things that are very consistent with what occurred in this case? Very consistent. Yes. He asked you, I think, earlier about the fact that these two girls, there was at least some comments about them being murdered because their parents were mixing races. You're familiar with that allegation? I'm somewhat familiar. Yeah, I don't know if there's any truth to those allegations. The truth is that those words were uttered in the investigation in this case, right? Yes, and are you aware that Amber Holder reported to your investigative team that Brad Holder specifically told her that Westphal had killed people in the past? Yes. Johnny Messer is the one you don't know, right? I don't know him. So we got Holder up here in this area, right? Where's Westphal live? I'm not exactly sure where Westphal lives. Connorsville? Connorsville. And you got Johnny Messer. Would you be surprised to find out that he lives down in Rushville? No. It wouldn't surprise me. I'm not saying, told about it. I just don't remember who Johnny Messer is. There was a woman named Taylor Hardaway. Does that sound familiar? Not until today. Johnny Messer's girlfriend. Do you have any reason to dispute that I've never spoken to her, reported various facts to your law enforcement authorities? I'd have to see them. If I told you she told your officers that Westphal and Brad Holder were two of the most violent people she knew, would that be a surprise to you? What officers are you referring to? Do you have that in a report? Well, I'm just telling you, if it's in your report, hypothetically, would that be a surprise to you? I mean, nothing surprises me anymore. But no, there was a reference in one of the reports that Hardaway Messer's girlfriend suggested that these two were fighting around Valentine's Day of 2017 because he was up here running around with some Vinlanders, she said. Does that sound? I saw that in this report? Yeah. First time I saw that. Would that cause you to be concerned about his involvement in this case? Not really, but it will be followed up on and I'll look into it like everything else. Are you aware that your report suggests that Miss Hardaway told your officers, actually, it was Officer Click, I recall, out of maybe Rushville or some other? Do you know what I'm talking about? I think he's like the chief down there. Yeah, that she told him that Messer actually admitted to her that he had killed somebody before. You follow up on any of that? I'm sure whoever you're referring to is your report. This isn't my report. And I'm going to say it's not a state police report. You're on the Central Command or Unified Command. I don't recall anybody telling me that, no. Were you aware that your team, actually obtained a search warrant for Hardaway's phone, okay, in 2018? Does that sound familiar at all? Who? Your team did. Got a search warrant for Messer's girlfriend's phone. What part of my team? I don't know. I just know it's in the report, okay? Do you have any reason to dispute that? No. And that when they did that, they were attempting to confirm what she was telling them about Johnny Messer. Which makes sense, right? Right. You'd go get a search warrant to corroborate her statements, right? And are you aware that in those recordings, your own investigators actually discovered audio recordings where Messer was offering up money to another individual, trying to hire somebody to make a hit for him? Did you know that? No. None of that sounds familiar. I'll have to review the report. I guess the question is, if those kinds of things were going on and they were surrounding this investigation, do you think you would have forgotten those things? Possibly. I mean, there's a lot going on. I mean, obviously what you're saying. Well, do you remember any side investigations because you recovered an audio recording of somebody who said they were trying to hire a hitman? I don't remember any side investigations. Like, hey, maybe we ought to talk to the local authorities and see what's going on with that. Do you remember doing any of that? I don't remember, but it possibly could have been done. Again, if this was done by Terre Haute and those people weren't communicating with us, no, I wouldn't know. If they were doing that investigation on their own and communicated with Murphy and Purdy and they were just giving me bits and pieces of the information, then yeah, I would assume they're following up on it. If they're telling me, hey, this is what happened, then I guess my thing is it doesn't seem like this stuff is kind of resonating with you at this point. So it must not have been a material part of your investigation. That's kind of the way I'm feeling about it. I mean, you have to realize I've been in here, 6 hours now. I'm getting tired. I'm trying to remember everything. I was very appreciative that you gave me information that I could prepare for, but the stuff that these names weren't on that, so I didn't have time to prepare. The people we're talking about are part of the 17 names that are on that list. By the way, it's the first time I've ever given a prosecutor even an inkling of an outline in doing this. Well, have you ever worked a case this big with this much information? No, neither one of us has. Me either. So it helps you to help me so I can prepare. I'll go back and prepare. Hold on a minute, let's keep talking about Messer and the Rushville people. So if I told you that in that report there was a second recording that was recovered from Amber Hornaday's phone that had Johnny Messer talk about holding a suspect hostage and shooting someone, would that kind of resonate with you? I've never seen this report. That's what I'm saying. You're talking about a report that I've never seen. If that kind of information was unearthed by your team, don't you think you being in the Central Command or the Unified Command would have known that? Should have, yeah. But like you mentioned, there were side investigations that wasn't getting relayed to us. So communication or the lack of would cause this not to be. That's why I don't remember it. I've never seen this report. I only know bits and pieces of what you're talking about. Elvis Fields, a Rushville guy, right? So now we're starting to see even more of a connection. We got Holder up here, we got Westfall down there, we got Johnny Messer, we got Elvis Fields. Definitely some connections here, right? That's what you say. I'd have to review all these reports and all this data again. If I'm taking it from your report, then it's okay for me to rely on that, right? I mean, you could be taking it out of context. I don't know, and I will. I'd have to read it myself, Brad. I want to be prepared. I want to give accurate. You know, Elvis had a sister named Mary Jacobs, yes. You know that Mary Jacobs was very helpful to you, your team, in reporting all this stuff? She's the one that I referred to earlier that was told was a bit crazy. My recollection is that she reported that Elvis admitted to her that he was on a bridge with 2 girls that had just been killed, and he was now a part of a gang, I think is what he said. Do you recall that? I recall. And you were trying to determine the veracity of her statement, so you had her polygraphed, right? Somebody did? Yes. And we use those polygraphs in court. They're pretty important, pretty reliable. And she passed that polygraph? I'd have to look at it. Would you be surprised to find that? No. You think maybe it might be time to kind of take a second look at this and kind of piece this together, or are you kind of like, we've already covered this? No, I think we'll take a look at some of the stuff, but I think the focus should be on Richard Allen and the evidence against Richard Allen. Tunnel vision, right? No, not tunnel vision. Well, we've got people in this room already that have said that there's potentially more than one person involved in this. Potentially, yeah. So it might be that some of these people were involved. I don't think so, but we'll definitely look into it. It's possible. Anything's possible. He mentioned the spit comment earlier that caught everybody's attention, right? From Elvis? Refresh my memory. That Elvis at some point got out of your officer's car and was walking into his home and turned around and came back, I think it was Murphy or Winters, and told him that if the spit was on one of the girls' body, would he be in trouble? That raised some eyebrows. Right, I do remember Kevin talking about that. And then the alibi problems between Ned Smith and Elvis, and I think Messer. Right? Yes. We're starting to see connections now between all of these people and the crime scene, aren't we? I don't know about crime scene, but there is a connection with the people, yes. I don't have any further questions. I've got 3 quick ones. First, I think it's Brad Holder that sold his car. It wasn't Logan. That's what I was thinking. I don't think Logan had a car. I want to ask you, am I in danger? Are you in danger? Yes, with Odinites? Are you? Should I be worried about that? Are you involved in it? I don't know. Here's what I'm concerned about. You said here plainly multiple times, Richard Allen did this. Richard Allen did this. Richard Allen did this, right? Yes, sir. And with that attitude, you're going to go in and claim that you're going to investigate this fairly. All this stuff that you've not heard before. I don't believe it. Have I ever told you anything and I didn't follow up on it? No. But I have definitively experienced police officers in my 30 years of doing this that fix their problems. Fix their problems. Is that a question? Are you going to fix these problems? Or are you going to actually look for the truth? I'm going to look for the truth, but I think I've already found the truth. But I definitely will look into this, no doubt about it, and I will find out if we have done the follow-ups and I don't know about it, and I will let Prosecutor McClellan know, and he can forward that information to you. That's all I have.